Due to his father's death, his man has tried a lot for many years. To make his father peaceful in the hell, he wanted to find the truth and decided to make a plan. He wanted those who harmed his father to pay the price. He also wanted to find the lost younger sister to live with her in a more wealthier life. That man was Choi Kong-ta. He was a skilled skydiver. His skydiving was not different from other men jump the bridge. Due to the hard life, his parents were harmed when he was just 6 years old. Due to his hard circumstances, he was raised by another American family. It was just my din, not my though or my lock. After he had drifted to my din, he had changed his name into Michael King. Hearing that name made it so special, and from then the name Choi Kong-ta didn't appear anymore. Although he grew up and lived in another place, he never forgot faces who killed his family members, since he needed to find the people as well as the boss who harmed his parents. And he created a gang that specialized in debt collection. All his henchmen were all prominent from the powerful ranks. He named his crew King Club. Today, he had a special mission to rescue Little Red Riding Hood. He rode alone into their lair, just like a mouse sneaking into a snake's den. His rivals were surrounding him in bulk, but he was the main character, so you already knew how it goes. With just a few basic moves, he could knock out all his opponents. When the last opponent falls, this will also mark the end of his final training session. Damn it, I thought I was actually going to save a beautiful woman. Vivian Castle gradually came over and said that the end. It turned out he was being studied by a doctor who was researching and analyzing the rhythm in his body. With this body RHMTHM, he could beat all. At that moment, Dennis had a new report about Canty Hall. He took off to Hawaii Airport. Michael King at that time was sitting in Porsche 911 Dakar to investigate him. It was a surprising coincidence when he discovered a girl secretly taking pictures of Mr. Kong, and he then asked Vivian Castle about how his small boy's family was. Vivian Castle absolutely asked Dennis for investigation. The troop took Kongta Hall down to the Dennis down and had to do it. He quickly grabbed her purse and gave it back to Castle. She was Jean Bo Bae, a Korean reporter. After getting her information, he immediately asked Castle bring her purse back. Poor reporters, where do they get money to lower their brothers? On the beautiful and dreamy island. Chairman Kong was welcomed like a rock star at a concert. Vivian Castle introduced herself to Chairman Kong as the lead representative here. Vivian Castle took the Chairman Kong on the hour to see every sights all around. She also conveniently reserved the most luxurious VIP room for him. He was also the first man who were willing to spend all money booking her entire resort. He was truly the most extravagant chairman. But surprisingly, all his action were being monitored by Michael's tracking cameras. Every move he made was reported back to him. At the same time, he was also observing the International Oil Conference. He knew that Chairman Kong was not here to attend the international conference. He just came here in order to conduct his money laundering deals. Michael accidentally discovered James from the CIA. He took over all black transaction in the surroundings of Trungdong. According to him, he just came here to see James to engage in various illegal dealings. As twilight began to fall, he walked along the beloved mountain range that held so many memories. Instantly, he remembered his sister and their father who had been harmed. It was also the last time he could see them. Michael swallowed in tears filled with a greed he could never forget. At the same time, a group of children also came in. He happily took the kids for a stroll around there. Meanwhile, President Kong was enjoying the life on the island with lots of girl. Our reporter also joined in this. He continuously took Mr. Kang's photos. Suddenly, she spotted Michael, his 8-pack abs glistening as he surfed the waves in the ocean. When he came ashore, she was taken back by his dense scars. She wanted to take his photos silently, but there was someone who came to steal her camera and ran. She rushed quickly to chase after him, but she couldn't. He had taken a boat out to sea. At that time, she felt so confused. Coincidentally, he also prepared to surf on the sea. She ran after him and pleaded for his help. In a true man style, he set the board down on the water. Seeing that, she paddled over. He quickly pushed her into the sea at lightning speed. Due to her scaredness, he shouted loudly, "Since she couldn't swim, why had you done like that?" But he didn't help her chase after the stealer, but he pushed her straight to a nearby rocky sea. After he had left, she just scolded himself. At night, while sleeping, Kong Ti-ho suddenly jolted awake to see Choi Hae-ryong returning. He said to Chairman Kong that, "If tomorrow's news didn't report how you harmed my family 25 years ago, you would know the consequences. Your family would have the same fate as mine." Seeing that the Kong president felt frightened, she suddenly opened the door and the sun has risen. There was an anonymous letter appeared in the forest. Inside the letter was just simile phrase "one day." From then, bodyguard of the restaurant had to stand strictly. Seeing any reactions, Michael decided to set off. He drove Porsche 911 Dakar to prevent James. When his subordinates came to check on him, he knocked them out on the spot. When he got off the car, James pointed a gun at him. He didn't say anything and just show his own phone. Inside was James' wife, who was kidnapped. James was worried and wanted to know what he wanted. In the evening, there was an outdoor party in the hotel. Jean Bobet also came here to take photos of President Kong. At that moment, James invited Kong president to meet at 2 p.m. tomorrow at Amon Prince Yacht. Meanwhile, the safeguard realized Jean Bobet take photos silently, so he took her to meet the president. He wanted to ask her why she wanted to report him, since she suspected that he didn't come here for oil issues rather than to smuggle weapons. Okay, so I will let you know the secret. I came here to meet Prince Amon to sign an important contract. If you didn't believe, I would give you a chance to report me after the successful contract. The next day the car took Mr. Kong to the meeting point. Jean Bobet was allowed to take on the boat with him. The surfboard carried them out the sea, where the yacht was waiting. Upon reaching the yacht, she couldn't come along with and waited outside. Inside there, Mr. Kong had signed the contract. He demanded the Prince Amon to take photos together, but he thought that it was the first beginning. And then he took off his mask suddenly. Kong Tae-ho, please saw my face clearly. Did you remember the police raid from 25 years ago? I was Choi Kong Ta's son. I had seen you killed both my brother and father. Ms. Kong afterwards drew his sword and ready to fight him. Why couldn't such a strong and experienced like that kill this old man? All of the old man's sword strikes were easily anticipated and dodged by Kong with great skill. Knowing that he was too old, he knelt down and begged him. He told the chairman Kong to let him know his partners. And taking that chance, he came to the surfboard and left afterwards. He didn't chase after him and just smiled. Jean Bobet just stood without knowing what had happened before. But it was surprising when the surfboard ran for a short time, it exploded. All the debris made Jean Bobet fall into the sea. Seeing that, he fell into the sea and rescued her. Jean Bobet saw him and turned out to be fainted afterwards. Meanwhile, Vivian Castle asked her why he had saved her, even she came with Chairman Kong. This was the problem between him and Kong Tae-ho. I didn't want other ones injured. Let's take this girl back home. After the Kong president's death in Korea, it opened an investigation. They had identified the witnesses who were present at the scene. Meanwhile, Jean Bobet came back to Korea after a dangerous journey. Michael returned to his hometown to settle. As he stood on the flight, he recalled the time when his adoptive parents brought him to the US. His gaze filled with hatred still happened after 25 years. Dear Dad, I was coming. Meanwhile, Jean Bobet was taken by the intelligence agency staff. On the way, he asked Jean Bobet who you had seen on the surfboard, but she said that she hadn't seen anyone. On this side, Michael drove a motorcycle through Seoul streets. Finally, he could stand at the highest point to see entire city where he used to live. Afterwards, he came back to an apartment. He came into and saw everyone pleased. Afterwards, they started to drink together. Dennis informed the boss of the Central Intelligence Agency's Anti-Terrorism Division. The man who took over was Cheon-jon, President Han's son. And Cheon-jon took Jean Bobet back home. She saw him come back and thought why he had been so cold. The next day, she stood outside to take photos of Chairman Kang's funeral. She suddenly saw Vivian Castle. Bobet considered her as the hotel representatives. But why had she gone to Korea for the funeral? Meanwhile, the President Chang also came in to pay respects. Michael also disguised himself as a police officer to sneak in as Harry. He saw the police and shouted for his accomplices to capture them. But Michael pulled out a wire hanging from his leg. All he could do was look up in surprise. Vivian Castle ran outside to grab a ladder, locking them inside the church. Michael took him into the room for confession. It's been a long time since I've seen Chairman Chang. He shouted in panic, asking, "Who are you?" At that moment, his bodyguard entered and didn't know what he had said. A little later, Michael stood at the church door, looking at Jean Bobet before walking away. Jean Bobet saw and knew that she had seen him in Hawaii. She suddenly drove her car to chase after him. Michael rode his motorcycle through the streets to make her chase after him, but it took a while and she couldn't see him. Jean Bobet got off car and didn't know where he was. Suddenly, he was on the bridge, playing the flute, calling out to her, and then laughing as he ran away. Jean Bobet quickly got on the car and chased after him, and he climbed onto the sidewalk of 3 buildings. He came into and laughed with her. When getting off, she felt so angry, and she suddenly saw the building similar to the one in Hawaii. She came in to take a look. She met the secretary to ask about the representative, Vivian Castle. But surprisingly, Vivian Castle had just walked out. Jean Bobet introduced herself as a reporter from the newspaper. She asked Vivian Castle about her relationship with the late Chairman Kong Luke. She said that she wouldn't reply any interviews during that time and walked away. The secretary followed her inside, but Jean Bobet spotted an invitation from the corporation and took a photo. Meanwhile, Michael King was practicing archery when Castle told him the female reporter had arrived. Should we deal with her? We have plenty to do, so let's ignore her. Dennis let Michael King know about Chairman Chang's multinational corporation. He rewired her to look for their family's information. On the way, President Chang angrily ordered his son. Even if they had to turn the church upside down, they must catch that guy. Dennis let Michael King know President Chang was Chang Ho. He had a gang in Korea. What was notable about him was his attraction to women. This was Chang Ni's daughter, 26, who studied dance. Her specialty was spending her father's money. Vivian Castle proposed to resolve the entire family's issues, but Michael King didn't agree since there was someone that wanted to look for. One day, Chang Ni was walking when she encountered her ex-boyfriend. As he intended to kiss her, she slapped him. Feel angry, he wanted to beat Chang Ni her, but Michael King appeared in time. Seeing this, Chang Ni hugged and kissed Michael King in front of him. Then, the two of them shared a drink together. He introduced himself as Michael King. The next day, the party of organization had organized. Jean Bobet arrived with an invitation but couldn't enter due to not following the dress code. Jean Bobet wandered outside and saw Michael King with Vivian Castle. She wondered what their relationship was, and Che Zhu approached and asked why she didn't come in. They said she wore unsuitable clothes to come in, and suddenly Che Zhu received a phone call, left. He asked the doctor to prepare some items for Jean Bobet. Meanwhile, Chairman Chang went with his children. They saw Vivian Castle with Michael here. Che Zhu also approached in. Chang Ni let Michael King. Che Zhu was the heir to Hanmin Corporation and an officer of the CIA. The party began, and Vivian Castle stood up to give a speech. She introduced the highest share of Castle organization was Michael King. He hoped to create many beautiful memories in Korea. After Jean Bo changed her clothes, she could come in, and Che Zui approached to compliment her. When it saw time for dancing, he invited Jean Bo Bei to dance with him. Chang Hoa also invited Vivian Castle to dance. Seeing that, Che Zul also invited Chang and I to dance together. Jean Bo Bei asked Michael King why he pushed her into the sea back in Hawaii. I had already sent a rescue boat and helped you take your camera. Just as Che Zul reached out to invite her to dance, Michael King turned and extended his hand to dance with her instead. While dancing, Jean Bobet saw Vivian Castle going outside and asked to take a break. As Jean Bobet stepped outside, she ran into Che Zul, who was curious about the man she danced with. I'm here today because of that woman. Then she asked Vivian Castle about the events in Hawaii. Irritated, Vivian Castle walked away and encountered Michael King, demanding he deal with Jean Bobet. Jean Bobet came over, linked arms with Michael King, and asked him to take her home. Vivian Castle was annoyed and told Michael King to go inside, but he didn't say anything. He still took Jean Bobet home. At the door, Che Zul offered to take Jean Bobet home, but she declined since she had already asked Michael King. I felt a step behind today. Michael King hugged Jean Bobet at work, which upset Che Zul. In the car, Jean Bobet was curious about Michael King's position at Castle Corporation, but he just smiled. He noticed a car following them and sped up to lose it. At that moment, Dennis, driving behind, sped up. Dennis shot at the tire, causing it to lose control and crash into a tree. Upon arriving at Bobbitt's house, he was clueless and scolded him for reckless driving. Jean Bobet pleaded with Michael King to help her interview Vivian Castle before saying goodbye and going inside. While he was out, he was arrested by the group. Jean Bobet, feeling helpless, started shouting in a panic. Kangta picked up her lost shoe and then fought off the group, making them flee. He gently put the shoe on her and then walked her home. Che Zul felt annoyed when seeing them in the corner. After the failed arrest of Bobet, Jang Ho was furious and ordered a formal invitation for her. And the Michael King's Doctor knew that Chairman Chang's people wanted to arrest Bobet, because she was the only witness in Chairman Kang's case. The next day, Jean Bobet went to Castle Corporation to return the dress. She unexpectedly ran into Che Zul and Vivian Castle as they were coming out. Vivian Castle frowned at Jean Bobet and went inside. When Jean Bobet tried to follow, Che Zul held her back. At Bobbitt's place, she invited Che Zul to go horseback riding with her the next day. Meanwhile, the doctor introduced him a new product. It could easily open iron bars in prison. Then, he also handed him a CD bomb. It can also make the car blow up easily. The next day, Bobbitt was walking when the secretary called her over and invited her into the car. Jean Bobet questioned whether the thugs were sent by him, and Che Zul waved his hand to shoo them away. Seeing this, the thugs had no choice but to leave. In the car, Jean Bobet said, "He saw you and Chairman Kong on the yacht, so he wants to get information from you." They went to the stables and ran into Michael King's group. Chani linked arms with Michael King as they chose the horses. At that moment, Che Zul asked Jean Bobet if she had used him to come here. "Yes, I happen to know they would be here today." After that, they rode out the horses and Chani watched Bobet and Che Zui as they rode together. She said that he was not just simply Che Zul's pawn. But President Kong didn't like that. Jean Bobet rode over to Vivian Castle but couldn't get any information from her. Not only that, Vivian Castle struck her house, which turned out to be panic, and ran away. Jean Bobet felt frightened and shouted. Seeing that Michael King chased after them, Che Zul followed, but Michael King overtook him and jumped onto Jean Bobet's horse to help her stop. Che Zul said thank you to Michael King for his help, and then they raced each other to find the winner. And finally Michael King was the winner. Although he wasn't happy, Che Zul still went down to shake hands with Michael King, and then he quickly went in to tend to his horse. While everyone was having tea together, they suddenly heard an explosion and ran out to see what happened. Che Zul explained that the horse's leg was broken, and he had to do it to prevent it from suffering. Meanwhile, at Chairman Chang's corporation, Dennis deliberately set off a smoke bomb to scare the employees into running outside, and he sneaked into Chairman Chang's office to set the explosive bomb. Dennis also managed to open the secret room with the safe, planning to blow it all up. Meanwhile, Chairman Chang received a phone call from Michael King. He informed him that he would be the next to be harmed. After hanging up, he received a message that this room would explode 3 seconds after activation, and then he used his phone to activate it. When the chairman and the assistant approached in, the room had exploded, and then the secretary laid down to protect him. Meanwhile, Che John still saw everyone racing on horseback. Jean Bo Bei came to ask him. Meanwhile, Michael King also came in and he suddenly received a phone call about the explosion. Michael King came and gave him another horse, but Che John refused. He didn't forget to call Jean Bo Bei Di Kung. Just Michael King sat alone. Vivian Castle suddenly arrived. Please don't cause any trouble, someone would be injured, but she wanted to deal with that reporter. Michael King felt angry and said who had required to do that. Upon hearing that, Vivian Castle apologized and promised not to happen anymore. Suddenly Chang and came to ask him to see sceneries. In the car, Jean Bo Bei wondered why issues persisted even after Chairman Kang's death. Che John advised Jean Bo Bei to give up some important things. Upon arrival, they found the building sealed off, and Che John's car was being monitored. The police came in to assess the situation at the explosion site. Police CO wondered why they set the explosive bomb in Chairman Chang's office. Or it was just a warning. She also informed Che John that there was a safe, but it couldn't be unlocked or broken into. This was a special safe. If tampered with or forced open, its contents would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Jean Bo saw the file and she glanced at the first page before walking away. Unexpectedly, the press badge fell out and someone had picked it up. Meanwhile, Michael was in the car with Chang and Dennis informed that around 50 kilometers all the information system wouldn't be effective anymore. He will reset in 3 minutes later. Chang and was worried about not contacting through phones. It's fine, you should get in the car, it's cold outside. He opened the trunk to monitor Chairman Chang's movements. Here, Dennis pretended to be a police officer, running after them with sirens, signaling to open the car door. As the secretary pulled down the car window, he threw a disc inside. Then he opened it to listen. Unexpectedly, it was a warning that the car would explode in 2 minutes, causing Chairman Chang to panic. Although the secretary advised him not to worry, but he didn't believe it and yelled for the car to stop before running out. Meanwhile, he followed and operated the explosive bomb. Coming back to Jean Bo Bei, she wondered whether he was a bad guy or not. She recalled the moments during racing horses. He advised her to find another job to work, and she saw Che John get into the car. Jean Bo Bei saw the police and chased after him. She hoped that she could find something, but unexpectedly the police CO was behind her. They sat down to eat spicy rice cakes. Police CO advised her not to report on the oligarchs. Jean Bo Bei showed her the paper she found, but she confiscated it immediately. Meanwhile, they were watching news and Chairman Chang complained about the explosion of Che Chun organization, and it came to the next car. He said he was Choi Hyeyong, thinking a lot, but they couldn't know the person who took over that accident. Chairman Han said that Che John was bringing the safe here. If that safe were opened, they would end their own life. Meanwhile, Dennis was sitting and following Che John's transferring process. Michael also took Chong Li back home. At that time, he received the messages that the results were exchanged. He took Chong and through the tight security into the building. However, they didn't let the stranger in, but Chong and didn't agree at all. She reluctantly took Michael to her own room, and then he advised her to have a shower. He stepped out onto the balcony and saw Che John bringing the safe in. Che John brought it and asked what it was. He wondered whether it was related to that explosion or not, but his dad just let him know that the Chairman Chang's car had just been exploded. The man who did this had also killed Chairman Kong. Meanwhile, Michael also took the hearing devices on their conversation. And when he came back, he saw Chong Ho and he invited to meet and drink Michael when he was free. He enjoyed the stroll around the house, which recalled him the haunting memory when his house was burnt. Suddenly, Chong Li came out just as they were exiting. He ran over to greet the uncles. Chairman Chong introduced Michael to his friend, the chief of EOC management. Next was Chairman Han Taisu of Hanmin Corporation. Afterwards, they said goodbye to each other. Approaching home, Chairman Han required him not to turn on the light. He informed his son that the one who caused the explosion was Choi Hae-ryong, who died 25 years ago. He recounted that 25 years ago, a Chinese ship appeared at Chusan port. The ship was carrying drugs worth billions of won. Meanwhile, we wanted to have capital to start our own life. And the man who took over this was Choi Hae-ryong. They had vowed to create traffic accidents to transport the drugs. But Choi Hae-ryong had just known it and we had persuaded him but he refused. And finally we just ended his own life. Chae-jon, please help Chairman Hang to help him. And it made Chae-jon feel confused. He felt terrible and walked under the heavy rain. He arrived at Jean Bo-bae's house and saw her. Upon getting off the car, Jean Bo-bae's mother came. And then they came back home together, and when he remembered what his dad said, he felt awkward. As for Michael, he ordered Vivian Castle to go to Chairman Chang's house tomorrow to open the safe. The next day, Jean Bo-bae was also in the police station. They played the video to review the moments before the explosion occurred. Jean Bo-bae realized that he saw Dennis in Hawaii. Meanwhile, Chae-jon was looking for his CV and his teammates. He also ordered his subordinates to find documents about Officer Choi Hae-ryong from 25 years ago. And on this side, Vivian Castle let everyone know that Dennis had come back to America. He regretted not completing our plan. And they noticed the picture, which prepared for Chairman Kong. The doctor also gave Castle a watch that had a tracker and could eavesdrop. After that, Castle arranged a meeting with Chairman Chong and his son. He gave him a watch which made him feel happy. Vivian Castle also gave Chong Ho another watch. He immediately put it without suspicion. Meanwhile, Michael came to meet Chong En-I and he gave her so many clothes and shoes. Chong En-I were happier to change all styles that he gave him that day. Michael also tightly kissed her, which made her moved. It was a time for him to make a requirement to arrive at her house. And he had given her the first kiss, which made her difficult to forget. In terms of Castle, he swiftly repelled into Chairman Chong's house. And Michael also took Chong Li back home. In the Dennis car, he along with his doctor monitored inside the house. Vivian Castle had broken into the office. Che informed her that there was a secret room in the office. Vivian Castle tried to find quickly and finally opened the secret room. She quickly found way to open the safe but failed. Dennis felt worried and called her to come out because the secret room was about to close. But she hesitated and she got trapped inside. Michael was happy to talk with Chong's family in the room. Suddenly, he knew that Vivian Castle had been trapped in the secret room. And then he pretended to spill tea on his clothes. Chong Ho took him to another room to change clothes. But once inside, he was knocked out by Michael with a single blow. As he ran out, he bumped into the secretary. The director Chong was knocked out and they ran in to check. Taking advantage of the situation, Michael entered the room to open the secret chamber for Vivian Castle. Please help me lengthen in 3 minutes later, but he said that the action would be cancelled. He suddenly came back Chong Ho room to avoid raising any suspicion. Back at the base, Vivian Castle felt dejected for not completing her mission. But he advised her not to blame herself and to let them open it themselves. At that point, she could just go and collect her things. Meanwhile, the police were also sending someone to break open the safe. Chae-jon recalled the moment he switched the safe. To his surprise, the safe wouldn't open. He informed that everything inside was destroyed. At that moment, Chae-jon quietly left. At the shoe shining shop, bodyguard Chong Ho asked Mr. Tebow to open the safe, but he refused. At that moment, his granddaughter was passing by, so he quickly pushed Chong Ho away. While Michael was at the base practicing archery, he heard Chong Ho order the capture of Mr. Tebow's granddaughter to force him to open the safe. Meanwhile, Jean Bo-bae was at her mother's shop. She searched for the article she had written about the safe opener from 30 years ago. As soon as she found it, Jean Bo-bae quickly took it. She followed the address to find Mr. Tebow and encountered his granddaughter. As Jean Bo-bae was with Mr. Tebow's granddaughter, they were ambushed and captured by Chong Ho's henchmen. They took the two to a junkyard. The secretary saw Jean Bo-bae and called Chong Ho to inform him. On this side, Michael heard that Jean Bo-bae was arrested. He ordered Vivian Castle to go to Chairman Chang's house while he went to rescue the hostages. Mr. Tebow was making shoes when he got a call informing him that his granddaughter had been kidnapped. The doctor entered and, seeing him worried, reassured him to stay calm. "We will rescue your granddaughter and let you know that someone will pick you up to open the insurance policy. When the safe was opened, everything must be handed over to us." Meanwhile, taking advantage of the guard's sleep, Jean Bo-bae untied himself and ran away. However, she was discovered by them and caught again. The secretary ordered to put her in the press machine. On this side, Mr. Tebow was completely surrounded by them. Take him to the place where the safe was located. He suggested that they go outside so he could concentrate. Vivian Castle was also sneaking into the room where the safe was, waiting for him. As soon as the safe was opened, he handed it to Vivian Castle. But before he could hand it over, Jang Ho entered. Vivian Castle had to step aside. Mr. Tebow grabbed the files and ran, but he was caught and taken away by them. On the way, as they were transporting him, a police car arrived and signaled them to stop. The doctor pretended to be a police officer and demanded that they get out of the vehicle because there was a bomb. Panicking, they ran away while Vivian Castle got into the car and drove off. Meanwhile, Michael drove alone to their hideout. He used his skills to handle everything quickly and efficiently. He got out, untied the little girl, and then anxiously went to look for Jean Bobet. At that moment, Jean Bobet was unconscious in the car. When the car was brought into the press, she woke up in a panic, realizing it was over. Fortunately, Michael saw her and rushed in to pull her out just in time. Jean Bobet hugged him tightly, trembling and crying uncontrollably. He assured her that Mr. Thibault's granddaughter was safe. Then he drove her home. Jean Bobet blamed herself for the girl being kidnapped. Because I saw the chief secretary of the corporation there. He might want to stop me from investigating the arms smuggling case. You should forget everything because the matter might end up with a lighter sentence. Then Bobbitt asked him, why do you always know to rescue me when I'm in danger? But Michael remained silent, saying nothing, and got into the car. Jean Bobet kept following and asking Michael to drive away, prompting her to chase after him, shouting. Finally, he stopped the car to let her get in. At that moment, at the base, Vivian Castle angrily asked Dennis where the boss was. But no one knew, as the boss had turned off communication, making Vivian Castle very angry. Meanwhile, Michael drove Jean Bobet to the villa. Meanwhile, the doctor arranged for the two of them to meet at the hotel. First, he placed them here for their safety. Hadu asked about the reporter, and the doctor said she was safe with the boss. Hadu recalled the man who saved her. Could he be the one who rescued the granddaughter? That's right, we often call him the boss. Vivian Castle was so angry that she went to the gym, but she still couldn't shake her frustration. Meanwhile, Michael was taking care of Jean Bobet's wounds, but she kept wondering why he had gone to that junkyard. I saw you being dragged into the car. But Jean Bobet thought it was the same when I fell off the horse and when the boss was kidnapped in front of my house. You always appeared at the right moment to save me. You're not my guardian angel, and you don't follow me every day. Michael, please don't get involved in my matters anymore. Don't worry, I will help you catch them. But you're not a police officer, why would you catch criminals? Meanwhile, three old men were discussing how to divide Chairman Kang's assets, because his wife and daughter were completely unaware of the assets in the Swiss bank. Outside, the gang claimed to have captured Jean Bobet, but Michael rescued her. Che-Ron angrily said. From now on, anyone who touches a hair on her head won't be forgiven, he said before walking away. He went to Jean Bobet's house to ask her mother about her whereabouts. But she said Jean Bobet called to say she was out for a local story and wouldn't be home today. At that moment, Michael sat watching Jean Bobet sleep. He told her his name was Choi Kong-ta. In her sleep, Jean Bobet had a nightmare and jolted awake in panic. She glanced over and saw Michael sitting there, watching her. He didn't say anything and stood up, but Jean Bobet begged him not to go. Please wait until I fall asleep before you go. Then she lay down and fell asleep. Seeing this, he went over and sat by the fireplace. The next morning, he went to the beach very early. He saw two children sitting together, playing in the sand. Michael quietly approached them. The children played and ran around him. At that moment, the parents of the two children called for them. The four-member family looked truly happy, but now, all of that was gone. Now, on the beach, he was the only one left playing alone. When Jean Bobet woke up and saw the phone number he left, she felt very happy. Meanwhile, he returned to the base. The doctor advised him to talk to Vivian Castle. As Michael was changing clothes in his room, Vivian Castle arrived. Where did you and that girl sleep last night? You're nothing like her, Vivian Castle. We can't get the documents, so why should we protect him out there? Michael looked at her and said, this is an order, before walking away. He went to the gym with Chong and I. She admired Michael's muscular build with envy. She went up to hug him and said, why have you never told me that you love me? Because when you hear that, I will completely disappear. Chong and I, have you looked over the investment project for John Me yet? I see that you're listed as the representative on it. If you joined this project, we would see each other often. So, Chong and I met with his father to request participation in the John Me project. Meanwhile, Jang Ho was reading the newspaper when T-Cat So arrived. He asked if Michael had gone to the opening of Sun Gon Fo Jeju yesterday. Yes, I didn't go, so only Michael went. Jean Bobet saw in the newspaper that Michael had attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. She thought he had clearly gone with her yesterday. At that moment, Che-John arrived. He curiously asked why she hadn't answered the phone yesterday. Jean Bobet informed him that she had been kidnapped yesterday. The person who kidnapped her was Chong Mi's chief secretary. But Che-John said it was impossible. Because he was at the chairman's house all day yesterday, and you were there too. But after you were kidnapped, who rescued you? Jean Bobet thought for a long time and then said she didn't know. Because I was unconscious at that moment. After that, Che-John researched information about Michael King. He received additional documents from his subordinates about the Harry case. At that time, he was a police officer. However, due to internal issues during the investigation, he was placed on leave at home. At the scene, only 2 adult bodies were found. The children's bodies were missing. Che-John recalled that the older child was 7 and the younger was 4. Back with Jean Bobet, she went to the hotel to meet the 2 Hazou family members. She showed a picture and asked him if he recognized the person, but he looked at the picture and said he didn't know. He also asked Jean Bobet to help him find a place to hide. So, Jean Bobet took the two of them home to introduce them to her mother. She looked at the two of them and thought they were guests renting a room. When Jean Bobet led Hazou to the room, he extended his hand and introduced himself as Hung Table. He then secretly returned to the shoe store to get a card. As soon as he stepped out, someone came and grabbed him. Tomorrow, he asked Michael to take them all down. As Michael turned to leave, he called him back and gave him the card from the safe. Back at the base, Dennis decrypted the secret within it. Vivian Castle said that their downfall was near. Take advantage of Jang Ho's absence. Why take advantage of Jang Ho in this matter? Are you really seeking revenge for that reporter? But Michael remained silent, letting Vivian Castle think whatever she wanted. At that moment, as Jang Ho helped her father to the car, Director Lee ran over and hugged Vanson's leg. So, he dragged him inside and beat him up for not having the money to pay. Desperate, he tried to climb onto the balcony to jump, but Michael threw him a rope to pull him back. Director Lee came to the room to inform the doctor. He initially gave me 300 million but later demanded 2 billion won back. Regarding the evidence, the doctor analyzed that it seems Chang Ho is in urgent need of money. He lent Director Lee money at an outrageous interest rate. If he doesn't get paid back, he will threaten the person's wife and children. Michael ordered someone to go to the director to prepare a lawsuit against him. Then the police arrived with a search warrant due to a complaint about his threatening violent behavior. So, Chairman Chang met with the manager and handed him a savings book from a Swiss bank. He then asked him to contact the prosecutor's office to help Chang Ho. As the manager left, Dennis tracked him and reported to Kong. He had just entered the elevator in the hospital with 2 bodyguards when Dennis and the doctor pushed a patient's bed inside. Vivian Cazo then threw a cloth, took down the bodyguards, and injected him with a sedative. They swiftly loaded the manager into the ambulance and left the hospital. When he woke up, he panicked upon realizing he was tied up. Michael stood outside, calling in to avoid being seen by the manager. I am Choi Kong, son of Choi Hae Ryong. From now on, you will follow my orders. You must punish Chang Ho according to the law. If you abuse your power to let Chang Ho escape justice, then your wrongdoings will be broadcast on the news at 9 o'clock. Saying that, he immediately knocked him out. Early in the morning, he woke up feeling embarrassed to find himself lying on the street. Everyone passing by looked at him and laughed. A while later, the bodyguard drove up, concerned, and helped him into the car with a jacket. In the car, he saw all the evidence of bribery, which made him furious. Meanwhile, Jean Bobet tried to call Michael at home but couldn't reach him. The manager ordered the bodyguard to have the secretary cancel all appointments for tomorrow. He had just called Chairman Chang when another phone rang. I told you not to contact Chairman Chang. Do you need me to send the documents to the television station? So, he reluctantly hung up the phone. Chairman Chang called to order the immediate arrest of Chang Ho. Chang Ho was walking when the police arrived to serve the arrest warrant. Chang Ho went to the station to ask if they received the order from their superiors at noon. If you dare to touch me, this will happen. As he turned away, the police tore off the order to handcuff him. At that moment, Chang Ni was drinking with Michael. She was so infatuated with him that she followed his every word. After that, the two answered an interview from a reporter. But when they mentioned her brother's arrest and the investigation, Chang Ni walked away. At the company, she complained to her father about her brother embarrassing her. From today, Michael will run the hotel in place of you because he sees you as a goddess and follows your every command. Hearing this, Chairman Chang felt a headache coming on. Che Zon was reprimanded for not knowing King had entered the country. However, Che Zon reported that he had already arrived in South Korea. The explosion at Chairman Kang's office and the bomb blast destroyed Chairman Chang's car. It was very similar to King's bomb tactics in Europe. Later, the intelligence agency informed Che Zon. Choi Hae Ryong's son, Choi Kong, has documents indicating he was adopted abroad 25 years ago. Che Zon suspected a connection between King and the adopted child. He then went to find Chang and I to ask about Michael King. I don't understand why the intelligence agency is asking about Michael. It's because it relates to your family's company. When Jean Bobet went to the hotel to find Michael, she was stopped by Vivian Castle. But Michael took her inside. Jean Bobet handed over the phone and asked, why could he go to the Jeju Island when you went with me that day? But he just smiled tightly. And he said he would bring her to one place. On the way, Jean Bobet felt curious again. Michael said when there was something needed, he would send a substitute. So today let your substitute work and play with me today. They went to the amusement park and Jean Bobet recorded him secretly. While playing the shooting game, she received the phone call from Jeju. He wanted to meet but Jean Bobet refused since she was busy, and afterwards they ate noodles together. Jean Bobet called him Kong Ta, which made him surprised. After a long day for relaxing, Michael took Jean Bobet home. He also gave her a big teddy bear. They said goodbye to each other. Seeing that, Jeju felt uncomfortable. Coming back to her room, she called the teddy bear Kong Ta. Che-John sadly sat drinking alone. The next day, Vivian Castle went to the police station to visit them. She promised to find him a good lawyer. Meanwhile, the chief executive received a document when Michael asked what he thought about the original. He had lecture schedules tomorrow and the day after. At that time, you should read this document to expose your crime that you committed 25 years ago. After that, he met with two allies. He informed them that there was someone named Kong Ta. He was Choi Hai-ryong's son, and he showed them the documents. Chair Han told him not be too afraid, they would protect him. After that, Che-John came to meet his father. He informed that the chief executive Lee was arrested. He had a speech the next day. His father told him to go to the hospital, so I was in charge there. If he came, I would catch him. The next day, the chief officer laid in the hospital with strict security guards, but Vivian Castle as a nurse administered anesthesia him too. Later, Michael and the doctor urged him to read the documents. If you did not carry out, you could not be safe. After that, he was escorted lots of people to the speech. When called to speak, he sat quietly, fearful. Finally, he trembled as he stepped forward. She requested to resign as Minister of Justice and came back home soon. Reports came to ask him lots of questions, but he didn't reply anymore. On Che-John's car, Che-John asked him if he knew what he looked like, just as his phone rang. Che-John answered the call, but he requested to talk with Chief Officer. Today I would give you a present for the reason ignoring my warning. On the building, Michael aimed at him but just shot him as a warning. And a group of cars had to turn back due to be attacked. The police observed and discovered that there was a sniper on the building. So Che-John got out of the car to block the building exit. But Michael wore a mask and jumped through the building's window. He took the shortcut to go through another building. On the way, the doctor acted as a cleaner to support Michael. He walked out to another building with a well-groomed suit. Che-John felt angry when he knew that the sniper has escaped. At that time, Bobby came in to ask him if the chief manager was raided. It was just that the chief officer's windshield was broken due to the bricks falling on them. And did you know where Thibault was? Like the last time I interviewed him, I never saw him again. Meanwhile, Vivian Castle asked him whether he had dealt with chief manager. I just gave him a warning. We have already warned. Why didn't we end everything and come back soon? At that time, the chief manager was escorted to the chairman Chang. Here, Chairman Han also called a special task force to protect the chief manager. In the house, they were discussing the plan to deal with Kong Ta. But the chief manager couldn't see how Kong Ta was. So he was worried and wanted to follow him. But the chief manager couldn't see Kong Ta's true face. He thought he had succeeded in shooting, but why did he deliberately aim for the small cross on the car? If King was Choi Kong Ta, he could have guessed the next target. Charon ordered the Seoul Police Department to seek a search warrant. And then he came to see his dad and his father's two friends. They didn't know why Choi Kong Ta had this documents. I thought that Mr. Thibault took it secretly and gave it to Kong Ta. Now I'm tracking down Mr. Thibault's whereabouts. At this time, Thibault was at home and Jean Bobet asked him if he needed her help, since she had a friend working at the Central Intelligence Bureau. But he said there was no need. Charon went to the police station to bring the document about Choi Kong Ta. He asked the Seoul police if they knew anything about King. He seemed to be international criminal, but what did he do with Choi Kong Ta? Because the King was Choi Kong Ta. Seoul police held a photo of a family of 4 people to watch. Che-John asked her to protect the chief manager from now, taking advantage of him to arrest Choi Kong Ta. Outside the chairman Chang's house was heavily guarded. Michael sneaked in to observe the inside and called the chief manager. If he committed a crime, he must be punished. Running away would not avoid his crime. We'll see you soon. The next day, everyone gathered in the manager's office waiting for Michael. Michael finally called. The chief manager deliberately prolonged the time for the police to find the location. At that time, Vivian Castle was watching the time to stop the call, and so the police failed. But Che-Jong thought Michael would fall into a trap to find the chief manager. Here, everyone advised him not to go because he knew it was a trap they created. But he decided to go since it related to his past. Vivian Castle came to meet Chairman Chang. Why just left Chang Ho in the detention room? If you can't do it, I will help Chang Ho out and leave. After Chang Ho's release, he went home and knelt down in front of his father. But Michael sneaked into the house. The chief manager was taken down to the basement. Wherever Michael went, he released a haze that made the guards scatter. He went down to the basement and gently knocked down the policeman. He walked to the chief manager with a gun. Suddenly, the police CO standing behind him asked him to put down his gun. But he turned around and gently pushed the fallen policewoman. Please stand still because I didn't want to kill you. He came to ask the chief manager about the last relic his father had left behind. And the police started to surround him. Che-John came to tell him why he thought Thady his father had left a relic and took out the picture to burn it. Seeing that fire, his resentment urged. He immediately took the chief manager hostage. And a glow on Michael was gone. On the car, Castle asked me if it was okay. Michael thought I should have given them a gift. According to Castle, Dennis made a video which the chief manager answered Jean Bobet's interview. He had told the truth that he had killed his accomplices 25 years ago. Dennis offered to cover Jean Bobet's face, but Vivian Castle did not give it, and the CD video was sent to the Chairman Chong. He immediately came to Chairman Han's house and opened it for him to see with Che John. Chairman Chong demanded that this report would be dealt first, and they need to prevent Chief Lee from holding a press conference. At this time, the chief manager was with the police CO. He had a phone asking to enter the room, but the phone turned on afterwards. After that he received a phone call that Choi Kong Ta asked him outside, but it turned out that Che Ron acted as Kong Ta. When he went out with police CO, she turned to answer her phone and lost sight of him. The chief manager Lee had got on the car. Dennis was also running behind the car. He went to that place and shouted Kong Ta, but the person coming out was Chairman Chong. He asked why he had betrayed him, and then he came closer to deal with the chief manager. The chief manager at that time used a log and counterattacked Chairman Chong. Meanwhile, Jang Ho also came into. He ended his own life on the spot. Michael and the doctor sitting in the car heard all their movements, but the hearing devices didn't connect. After this incident, the chief manager went in and told them to come back home first. I was still here to deal with some problems left. Then he called his superiors to report that the chief manager had been harmed. The main culprit was King. Later the police were present to inspect the crime scene. Police CO accidentally saw the watch that Jang Ho left. Going out, Che John scolded the police why he let this happen. She only knew how to apologize for not protecting the chief manager well. After the chief manager was settled, Chairman Chong met with Chairman Han. He expressed concern because the reporter was Che John's girlfriend. Why I didn't know when my son had a girlfriend, but not at all, you could deal with her. Michael sat and heard that they wanted to deal with Jean Bobet. He immediately asked why Jean Bobet's face was edited into this. Vivian Castle apologized that she told him to do like that. I had said before, did not get somebody injured if they were not related to us. Michael, I just wanted to fight fast and come back to USA. Why was that girl more important than this? You seemed that girl important than our relationship, didn't you? Meanwhile, Jean Bobet arrived at the scene to meet Che John. He asked her not to report the interview with chief manager. Jean Bobet didn't understand what he said and left away. Afterwards Che John met him and Michael called Che John. He knew that the interview video was edited and dubbed. I was so happy for handling the chief manager for me, but I didn't need to deal with. Afterwards, Che John phoned the intelligence department and knew that the recording was fake. They grafted faces and changed their voices. At that time, Vivian Castle was driving when the doctor called and told her to return to the matter Jean Bobet had resolved. But she didn't hang up and said that she would wait them for protecting that girl. And Bobet was driving on the road. There was a car following behind. At home, Che John was worried when Chong came home. He made him stop calling. At that time, Vivian Castle pretended to be the chief secretary and asked Jean Bobet to the warehouse. When Jean Bobet arrived, he received a phone call. Vivian Castle asked her to the refrigerated car and locked the trunk, left. Jean Bobet was scared and called Michael to say that he was locked in a refrigerated car. At this time, Che John also called Jean Bobet and knew that she was in danger. He angrily called Jang Ho, but he insisted that he hadn't done it. Here Dennis pinpointed the car's location for Michael to chase after. Che John also ran behind the car. Feeling so cold on the car, he was fainted. Vivian Castle opened the car door to check and then closed it coldly. Michael ran to unlock the car and brought her out. He used the blanket to make her body feel warmer. When she was conscious, she didn't know where she was and he hugged her in front of Che John. And then Che John came to ask her. She told him to be fine and followed him. Coming back home, her mother worried and scolded her for getting a new topic. Che John bowed to her mother and left without saying. In the car, Che John wondered why. Who was Michael who could find that place so quickly? Upon returning to the subordinate room, he told Che John he had found Mr. Thibault's niece's tutoring class. He ordered to arrest Mr. Thibault and called to meet Michael. He thanked him for rescuing Jean Bobet. Che John told him that Jean Bobet has been his woman since we first met 8 years ago until now. Why did not say it to Jean Bobet? I could not change the past, but the future will change according to me. And there was hidden man who secretly opened Michael's car. He came to realize then they attacked him. But they were not Michael's rivals and they rushed away. The next day, Officer CO showed the watch with GPS and eavesdropping devices found at the scene, but she couldn't identify the fingerprints on it. At this time, Jang Ho called Che John to ask about the watch that had been dropped. So Che John sneaked into the morgue and took the chief manager's fingerprints. Afterwards, he sneaked into the inspection room and printed the fingerprints on the watch. As soon as he came out, the police CO saw him. The next day, Che John held a press conference and said that King had killed the chief manager. Michael was also watching TV when he and Vivian Castle went to the newspaper. A curfew was being implemented outside. We didn't need to be afraid, the people who need to be afraid were them. In the end I could expose the truth. On this side, Che-John met and asked where the watch was. That watch was given to me by Vivian Castle herself. Che-John heard that and went to Vivian Castle to ask about the watch she gave to Jang Ho. Why installed GPS and eavesdropping devices? But Vivian Castle told me the watch was given to me by someone else and forced me to give it to Jang Ho. Meanwhile, the police arrived at Mr. Thibault's house to arrest him. Che-John entered the room angrily and asked whom he had given the stolen document to, but he said that he hadn't given to anyone. So, Che-John mentioned his niece to deliberately intimidate him. He shouted and banged his head on the table, prompting Officer Seo to rush in and have Mr. Thibault taken away. You said you asked to report the situation but forced you to take testimony like that? Meanwhile, Michael with Chani work with Japan's companies to find investment sources. They set the condition that if Michael took the lead they would invest 30 billion yen. Hearing that, Chani felt relieved. Jang Ho also met with Vivian Castle. She pretended to cry, claiming she was forced to give him the watch. Meanwhile, Jean Bo-Bei went to the police station to ask about Mr. Thibault, but Che-John came in and invited her outside. He also let him know that Mr. Thibault was at her house. Why had you ever said that you hadn't known their place? She said sorry but he had arrested the wrong person. So, Bobbitt entered and asked Mr. Thibault if he had ever met King, but he insisted he had never met him. At home, Mom asked if I had met Mr. Thibault. I just met him, Mom. He was arrested for the case involving the Ralmi Corporation's money laundering. Upon hearing about the Ralmi Corporation, she gasped and immediately dropped her basket. Chairman Chung was a wealthy man, but his eldest son was involved in organized crime. Meanwhile, Mr. Thibault was sitting asleep when Che-John poured water over his head. I asked him why he was protecting King. He still said he didn't know, which made Che-John extremely angry and press his point further. Seeing this, his subordinate rushed in to intervene and handed him the urgent letter. Inside was a photo of meeting with the condition to release Mr. Thibault. And the police CO asked all the police to set up the ambush. And Che-John had prepared to load ammunition into his gun. He prepared to wear a bulletproof vest and a voice-changing device. Arriving at the meeting point, the police arranged strictly. In the car, Doctor and Dennis were also monitoring the situation outside. Later, Dennis pretended to be a delivery man and asked Che-John if he had to order beef ribs, but Che-John said no. Dennis was listening to the phone and handed it to Che-John. And then Dennis got on the car to escape. Michael let Che-John know that the phone was about to explode, so he immediately threw the phone away. Inside the car, the doctor pressed the bomb button to explode continuously. Michael rode his motorcycle and came in front of Che-John. Inside this CD was all he had done, including the evidence destruction. Let's conduct a negotiation. And Che-John ordered to release Thibault on the spot. As soon as he held the CD and aimed his gun at Michael, but Michael dodged in time. Che-John used the number 8 handcuff to catch him, but unfortunately, Michael had handcuffed him to the fence and got into the car to drive away. Che-John saw him and shouted out loud. Meanwhile, they were waiting for their information but their plan failed. They heard the news and told each other to be more careful since King was still somewhere. Michael sat and listened to Chairman Han, said that he always waited for that hidden man. He smiled and said that he himself would welcome me. On this side, Mr. Thibault went home, the two grandchildren cried and gugged together. Jean Bo-Bei thought that he wanted to let him go and went to thank him. Che-John held her hands and told her to starting falling in love. But Jean Bo-Bei refused since they had ended so far, but for him, it had never ended. Due to her, he decided to come back. The next morning, he told Jean Bo-Bei that he wanted to meet the person who saved him and his niece, and he called Michael and told that he wanted to meet him, and later, he arrived at her house. Jean Bo-Bei told him to go with her since there was someone waiting for him. At that time, there was a police secretly taking their photos. He took Michael to meet his grandfather. He asked him if he had killed the chief manager but he told him that he didn't. When they saw Michael off, Bob had an appointment so she gone with him. On this side, Che-John felt angry when seeing photos of Michael and Bo-Bei. The next day at the inauguration ceremony of B Island, Che-John also appeared. Michael put Changi's arm together and Casso went with Changho. Michael spoke of his pride that the Casso Group was able to design it. Che-John found the B Island beautiful and hoped that Casso Group could succeed. And then Michael returned to the base. The doctor said that the Hanteso house had no vulnerabilities at all. At that time, Castle arrived. Michael said that he would catch Hanteso the next day. After that, Vivian Castle went to the police station to present a bunch of flowers. Che-John revealed that inside was listening devices and time bomb. He knew that you were accustomed to me, so he asked me to do like that and said that he would sneak in Chairman Chung that night. And Che-John asked police CO to protect Vivian Castle. Coming back home, Che-John told this to his father. He decided to order all his security team to protect the Chairman Chung. This time, they didn't let them go. Dennis in the car monitoring Hanteso house and saw that his security team had all left, leaving only a girl. At that time, Michael also got dressed to go to Hanteso's house. At Chairman Chang's house, the police and security team were tightly surrounded to wait for King. Vivian Castle was also taken to sit with Chairman Chang. Meanwhile, Michael appeared in Hanteso's house and dealt with his bodyguard. Inside Hanteso, upon seeing the security guard taken down, he prepared a knife. He pressed the button on his wheelchair to call his son. Michael jumped down in front of him. "You were Troy Harrian's son." Over here, Che-John heard his father and suggested he should buy some time, saying he would be back soon. "Hanteso, what did you and your friends commit 25 years ago? Why did you come here today?" "I wanted you to inform you're committing crimes 25 years ago and clear the Troy Harrian's charges. I wanted you to donate your assets to the society. If you did not do that, I will announce your sons committing crimes." Hearing that when driving, Che-John felt so angry. Dennis were outside monitoring the situation and urged the boss to hurry since time was out. Michael gave him 24 hours to announce everything publicly. Upon turning away, he tried to approach him closer to attack him, but with just a light push, he knocked him out of the wheelchair. He also pretended that he would hold a press conference to reveal everything, but upon turning away, he stood up and slapped on his shoulder. Angrily, he intended to end his own life, but he asked, "Did you want to know your younger sister?" Dennis asked to leave soon, but Michael still wanted to know her younger sister's information. As soon as the police entered, Michael ran away. And then he could escape from his henchmen again. Back in the room, Vivian Castle stitched up his wound, and Michael said he was not paralyzed on one side at all. Perhaps he had his own reason for that. Meanwhile, Dennis also watched the news 15 years ago, which mentioned Hunter Shaw. He was paralyzed on one side since he saved a soldier who stepped on a mine. He said that 2 legs of Hunter Shaw were still intact. So the doctor informed the boss that after that incident, Division Commander Hunter Shaw was awarded a medal and became a hero. But at that time he was investigated for misusing public funds. His being honored as a hero overshadowed the misuse of public funds. But he said that his younger sister had been still alive. And at that time he recalled that incident. The next day Che-John met Castle to ask for her help to catch King. She set the condition that his intelligence agency had to stop the investigation into her company. Outside, Police CO was using detecting and scanning devices. Surprisingly, Michael arrived and greeted her. She fell down, but luckily he caught her in time. She thanked for him. She introduced herself Siomi Su and took over this incident. He told her to be more careful, but his left shoulder was injured. He said that he had been injured during playing tennis. And then he went to meet Che-John and Castle. He asked Michael why King took advantage of Castle. Who knew what his target that time was? When going outside, the police CO asked Che-John why his left shoulder had been injured. He said that it was due to tennis. But he was familiar with right hands. Why could it happen? Meanwhile, Jean Bo Bei was at the cafe when Michael arrived. "Why hadn't you given up on investigating the Jalmi Corporation?" "Because I want to reveal it to everyone. It's all because money and power had manipulated everything." Meanwhile, Jang Ho came to Bo Bei's house and vandalized everything. Feeling angry, Mr. Thibault bit his ear and asked him outside. Michael was eating skewers with Bobbitt when she received a call at home, prompting. She apologized to her mother and didn't think that they would come to their house. She advised her not to be involved in Jalmi Corporation anymore. On this side, Che-Joel angrily called Jang Ho to warn him not to touch Jean Bo Bei's family. And then he came to meet Jean Bo Bei. She wondered why King wanted to harm Chairman Kong and Executive Manager Lee. The results would be available soon. When he confesses, I'll let you know. Suddenly Michael entered Chang and I inside. 4 of them met each other. Trang and I asked why she wrote a fabricated article about the Jalmi Corporation. She criticized him for not paying attention to his own people. Che-Jalm held Jean Bo Bei's hands and said that he was busy catching King. He stood up to go to the restroom but then placed his hand on Michael's left shoulder. He tried to press down to see his reaction. Feeling hurtful, he tried to bear. Afterwards Che-John ordered his henchmen. When he came out, they please attacked his left shoulder. As soon as Michael got out of the car, someone came to attack him. In spite of being injured, how could he be a Michael's rival? With just a few light moves, he was forced to flee. Michael returned to the base and asked if the news for tomorrow's newspaper was ready. Yes, sir. Tomorrow the press would publish the news that we provided. The next day Chairman Chang was furious since it reported on the money laundering of Jalmi Corporation. Suddenly the secretary came and informed that they were selling company's shares. Chang and I was also surrounded by reporters taking photos. At that moment, Vivian Castle informed Jang Ho that the partnership between the Jalmi Corporation and Castle would be cancelled. He anxiously asked if they would be able to recover the 200 billion won they had invested. Hadn't you read the contract? It's time to start your new life. Meanwhile, at home, Jean Bo Bei's mother was watching the news about the Jalmi Corporation. She was worried since it was perhaps due to her daughter and decided to stop it sooner. She came to meet Chairman Chang and asked him not to harm Jean Bo Bei since she was his son. Vivian Castle was at the base alone and overheard this conversation. He angrily said that your daughter had brought our company to bankruptcy. Could it be that you and your daughter want to take revenge on me? Afterwards, Chairman Chang came to meet Chairman Hang and told about Han Sura. 27 years ago she said to have been pregnant and I gave her money to abandon that child. But I couldn't imagine that that reporter was my daughter and told me not to harm her. On this side, Vivian Castle was changing the bandages for Michael. She asked him whether he loved her or not. What I needed right now was not a woman, just revenge. So in addition to Jiang Ho and Jiang Ni, Chairman Chang also had another daughter, Jean Bo Bi. Coming back to base, Michael recalled what her mother told to Chairman Chang. The doctor asked him if he needed to put Jean Bo Bei in the group who needed to be dealt, but Michael just kept silent without saying. Later, he said not to deal with Jean Bobbitt, and this was an order. Vivian Castle sat in the car and recalled the time spent in Korea. He had fallen in love with Jean Bo Bei, and she decided to come to Che John's house under the heavy rain. She had betrayed Michael and revealed everything. Vivian Castle drove away, thinking it was all because of him. Michael was the one who caused this, not me. Che Zon realized that it was Michael. I would kill you as soon as possible. Vivian Castle returned to the base and said tomorrow would be the end, but my mind felt uneasy. The next day Che John arrived at the station and ordered a force to fight. He took people to Jean Mead Group and explored all the camera and eavesdroppers. And he let everyone know Michael was king and Choi Kong Ta. Then you should deal with him with your own hands. Michael was getting a foot massage and relaxing with Chong Li. She wondered him why the company's documents were leaked outside. So, he sent the staff outside and gave her a foot massage. Chong Li came closer and hugged him. She felt happy. Afterward, as they were leaving, Chong Li received a call urging her to return quickly. Coming back home, his father let him know that Michael was king. His father also took her phone and pulled her into the room. Meanwhile, Michael went to see Jean Bobbitt to invite her out for some fun. He recalled that when he was 7, he was adopted by American parents, but he always wanted to return to South Korea. But I didn't know how my father was. I just knew that he had died. He didn't say anything and hold her hands. She smiled and took him back home for a meal. However, Che Jo came to meet Vivian Castle. Tomorrow, you should wear this to Michael. Meanwhile, he was happily eating with everyone at Jean Bobbitt's house. As soon as he left, Michael kissed Bobette before getting into the car. And suddenly Che Yon came out to ask her that she had refused him due to him. He was not like what you thought. But Jean Bo Bi apologized and left. He went back home and recalled that moment. He smiled and called her just to hear your voices. And Bob decided to meet him tomorrow. The next morning, as Michael was getting dressed, Castle walked in. I gave you this, you definitely had to wear it. Because this is what I prepared for you. And I would not give you something like this anymore. Thank you. You handled the Bee Island situation very well and then left. At this moment, the doctor was looking at pictures of a friend in the US. Dennis asked if you think you will meet your family again in the US. Michael along with Castle went out. Suddenly he heard Chang Ho say that he would capture the reported and throw her into the river. He didn't know it was a trap that Che John had created to deceive him. Hearing that, Michael came to find Jean Bo Bei. Dennis also followed him. Vivian Castle felt sad and drank at home alone. She wrapped the wire around her hand, causing it to bleed without realizing it. She called Che Yon to report that Michael had set off. He pressed the button, causing Dennis in the car to experience interference that hurt his hand. The satellite tracking the boss also disappeared, and he couldn't be contacted. Dennis reported to the base that the doctor had lost the satellite tracking. Outside, the police, along with the special forces, were storming the secret base. The doctor discovered this, so he pressed the button to destroy the entire system. Dennis was extremely worried as he couldn't get in touch with the doctor. Here, the doctor took one last look at the place before pressing the button to release a thick smoke. The police fired many shots at him, causing him to collapse right on the spot. Over here, Michi was also in danger. They found someone to impersonate Jean Bo Bei and hung him from the bridge to lure him in. When he put on the mask and approached, he struck him once, and he immediately ran away. He went to untie him but realized that it was not Jean Bo Bei. Suddenly, Che John called out to him from the other side. As he turned back, she slashed and knocked the mask off his face. Then, a lot of gunshots rang out. He was hit by a bullet. Despite that, when Michael saw Vivian Castle there with them, he realized that something had happened at the base and that she had betrayed him. He decided to escape by jumping to Han River. Jean Bo Bei was working but felt anxious. He couldn't understand why he was not answering the phone. The police was deployed to find him. Reporters were also present to cover the incident. Che John ordered that even if they had to drain the lake completely, they must find him. Don't think that he was dead because he was king. At that moment, Vivian Castle called Che John, asking him to fulfill his promise. This operation had nothing to do with the Castle Corporation. On this side, Michael had something to attend to and needed to return to the US urgently. She recalled the day when Michael rescued her from the kidnappers. The first time they met, he introduced himself as King. Castle, with tears streaming down her face, apologized to Michael. Che-John held the press conference and informed that he had eliminated King in Han River. Jean Bo-Bei stood right next to Che-John to announce the news. She thought to herself, could it be that he didn't make it this time? And they happily met each other due to eliminating the threat for so long. Chang and I in the room, drinking, and felt heartbroken upon hearing this news. Meanwhile, he heard the news that King was actually Troy Kanta. Chief Seo recalled the day he jumped into the sea of flames, trembling as he looked at a picture of his daughter. As Vivian Castle returned to the secret base, Che-John arrived. His subordinates numbered many. Why was there only one person at the scene? Because Michael was no longer around. You don't need to look for his people. That will be my decision. It must be completely eradicated. I gave Michael to you not because I feared you, but because I wanted to use you. Che-John angrily aimed his gun at her. Aren't you afraid of the consequences? If I didn't contact the Castle Corporation within 24 hours, a document would be released, related to those and those of everyone involved. Che-John reluctantly lowered his gun. After that, she went to see the doctor one last time. Don't forgive me. Jean Bo-Bei approached Che-John and asked when he publicly announced King. Che-John informed her that King was Troy Kanta and that he also had another name, Michael. Jean Bo-Bei felt surprising. She quietly left with heavy heart. She recalled the day he rescued her at sea. She couldn't accept the reality like that. Seeing this, Che-John rushed over to help her walk back. Back at home, Mr. Thibault heard a strange noise. Oh-Hei went to the door and saw Michael walk in, covered in wounds. He helped him into his room, feeling very worried. He urged Michael to go to the hospital, but Michael, in pain, insisted it wasn't necessary. He begged him not to tell Jean Bo-Bei about this. Outside, Che-John was also bringing Jean Bo-Bei back. In her room, she lay on the bed, feeling sad. At that moment, his grandchild returned, so he remembered to go buy some antiseptic. Che-John immediately asked what the antiseptic was for just as Jean Bo-Bei's mother arrived. She entered the house and met Jean Bo-Bei. Che-John was about to go home when he heard Jean Bo-Bei crying, so he went back. He said to her mother that King had been Michael. She didn't know to do, just comfort her daughter. Outside, Mr. Tebben saw Che-John was here, so he stood a chance to take Michael out. Hearing the voices, he went out to check. He went to Thibault's room and there was a piece of paper with blood. Feeling suspicious, he went to find. Fortunately, Michael went by taxi with Mr. Trebon. After that, he arrived at Chairman Chang's house where his father was. Everyone was talking about how they had dealt with Michael when Chang and I came out, making a commotion. She was sorrowful, said that they had to return Michael since she loved him so much. Meanwhile, he took the bullet that was lodged in his shoulder by himself. Mr. Thibault wondered why the boy was injured but still alive after jumping into the river. He recalled that the doctor had given him a bulletproof vest and an oxygen tank. He could stay underwater for 15 minutes without needing oxygen, so that I could be alive right now. I had a lot of things left to do, so I could not die. My real name was Troy Kanta. The next day Mr. Trebon brought him food. Mr. Thibault asked him if he let Jean Bo-Bei know this one. He didn't want let Jean Bo-Bei know since he was scared of her danger. I see that she has been crying continuously. She must really love you. I can't love anyone because they'll be in danger. At that moment, Seo Mi-Su went home and sat down to look at her photos. Curious, her father asked his daughter about her experiences, and she mentioned that her father had also been a police officer. Seeing Jean Bo-Bei cry, Mr. Trebon felt compassion and invited her to come along. He took Jean Bo-Bei to meet Michael. She stood frozen for a while, then ran over to hug him. He pushed her away and said, "I am not Michael, I am King. Michael was dead and you should go home quickly. I didn't want you to appear in front of me." She cried and ran away by the road. While Jean Bo-Bei was talking to Mr. Thibault, Che-John arrived. He took her eat porridge. Jean Bo-Bei sadly asked if he had found the evidence yet. "I didn't understand why you were shedding tears for someone like him." Jean Bo-Bei just ate without saying. After that, she wandered alone, reminiscing about the day she first met him in Hawaii. And every time she was in trouble, he always arrived just in time to save her. So Jean Bo-Bei came to meet him. But when she ran to open the door, Che-John covered her mouth. He pushed her outside, leaving her alone above. Jean Bo-Bei hurriedly ran up the stairs. In her mind, she imagined the scene of the two of them shooting at each other. Luckily, when she came it was just Che-Zon. She angrily asked why he was following her. "Because I wanted to protect you. Don't ever use the excuse of protection to follow me." She angrily got away. At that time, Michael was practicing climbing the wall, unable to stop thinking about Vivian Castle. Che-John returned to the station and ordered surveillance on Jean Bo-Bei all the time. At that moment, Jean Bo-Bei got into the car with Mr. Trebon. After returning from practice, he stood outside the construction site and noticed police officers watching him. Bobbitt also came here to find but didn't see anyone. Suddenly she received a phone call from Michael that she shouldn't find him because he would be dangerous. He returned to the old place, and the scene from 25 years ago came back to him. The heartbreaking cries in the flames and the uncertainty of his sister's fate were unforgettable to him. While Vivian Castle on this side was working, the secretary informed that the American corporation called, but when she hung up, no one replied. So she asked the secretary who had just called and learned it was Director Michael from the headquarters. Afterwards, Che Zhan reported that he hadn't found his body and didn't know why. If he were still alive, he would definitely take my life, because he hadn't forgiven such these actions. I had just returned from Bobbitt when Vivian Castle called to arrange a meeting. Michael and I have collaborated for 15 years. The King Club Corporation came to South Korea not only for business but also to take revenge. When I knew him that he was king, I told it to Kezan. I had done like that since I want something better for him. If Michael contacted you, please let Che Zhan know. The next day Jean Zhou recalled what Castle had said. And suddenly there was a girl who brought the greeting card. When she opened, she found out that it was Michael. And suddenly, Che Zhan appeared. Seeing him, she was puzzled and dropped the card accidentally. Che Zhan picked it up for her and told her to come with him. Michael was also outside and saw them get into the car. At home, he invited her a lavish meal with a birthday gift. She opened it and saw a beautiful necklace, but Jean Bobet refused to receive it. I knew that you liked Michael, but he was the killer. If he was alive, I would arrest him and deal with him. Since it was good for you. But Jean Bobet didn't say anything, just cried. The next day, as she got into the car, she heard Michael calling, but he told her not to look back. Head to the car wash on the left. The police also followed her. After Jean Bobet ran to the car wash, Michael jumped to drove the car. He immediately drove off. When the police saw, he didn't see her car. When they came outside, he gave her a pen as a birthday gift. Michael, I didn't understand you clearly. I didn't know how you were. Michael held her hands. If you ask me to, I will never appear in front of you again. Michael, I believe that you couldn't take their life without reason. He didn't say anything and just hugged her. At that moment, Che Ron was in the office when the subordinate came to report that they lost track of Jean Bobet. He called but she didn't hang up. Che Ron felt angry and punched his subordinate. Until the evening, he called her but she didn't reply. Charon felt so angry. The next day, the police station reported that the bulletproof vest had been found in the Han River. Charon recalled Michael's face when he was shot. He then ordered the team to stay alert because King was still alive. Meanwhile, when Police CO was at home with his dad, she was informed that King had been alive, and she rushed to work. Seeing that, his father felt so worried. The two old men were anxious upon hearing the news. It was all because his subordinates hadn't handled the situation well in the past. At that time, the chairman Han recalled the day 4 of them burned the house together, and there was another guy, who was burnt. His car caught fire, but they couldn't find the body. It meant that he was alive. We needed to find him. Back at the police station, CO kept looking at the family photo over and over again. When Chang and I was drunk, there were some strangers and brought her out. Michael came to beat them and took her on the car. During that time, her bodyguard also rushed in. Afterwards, he called Che Zhan to meet. However, he was required to go alone, otherwise, his father would be stripped of his authority. Che Yan came to ask his father if there was any secret he didn't know. He stewed up a gun and a bullet that had been laced with poison. He told him to take the bullet. Just one would spread the poison throughout his body in 30 seconds, and there would be no cure. After you could deal with him, I would give you the secret. Che Yan drove a car to Han River according to Michael. After that, he took a speedboat to meet Michael. Che Yan aimed the gun at Michael but he requested him to lower it. If not, I would press the button and it would explode. So both of them lowered their weapons. Che Yan asked him why Michael had wanted to see him suddenly. Two men beat each other. But Che Yan didn't beat Michael. He loved it and quickly fired the gun, but Michael kicked it away, sending the weapon flying. Che Yan was beaten by Michael and he couldn't stand. Che Yan, you should hold a press conference there soon. And how he could tell that he was beaten by the dead person. At the new headquarters, Dennis was monitoring Macau. He is an international criminal linked to the Seoul Association in Hong Kong. Mr. Thibault arrived with a picture of Che Yan, saying he would meet Drug at the intelligence agency for a transaction. At that moment, Michael disguised himself as Che Zhan and aimed a gun at Dennis, startling him. So this was the final gift the doctor left for me. You acted well, even Che Zhan wouldn't be able to recognize it. And then they went to the transaction place and there was Mr. Thibault who was waiting. Mr. Thibault opened the briefcase of money for them, and arranged to conduct the transaction 2 days later before getting into his car and leaving. They saw and suspected it was a trap. If so, we would set another trap to wait for him. In the car, he took off the mask and laughed. At home, Che Yan's father tried calling Hai but couldn't reach him. Chairman Chang and his son also arrived and felt worried about Che Yan. On the day of the transaction, Dennis and Mr. Thibault arrived with the briefcase of money. They brought a briefcase for my Tui but suddenly they surrounded Dennis and Thibault. but everything had prepared well, which filled the area with haze. Michael, disguised as Cheon from the intelligence agency, launched an attack on them. The last guy, he gave him a punch. Dennis and Mr. Tebow brought the briefcase for Reginto Cheon's office and opened the safe to store it. And on this side, Vivian Castleg called America account to open the account password of Michael King. However, she was informed later that the account had been withdrawn yesterday and no longer had a balance. Vivian Castle realized that the $1 billion in Michael's account had been fully withdrawn. Could it be that Dennis took it, or was it Michael? Afterward, she went to her car and found flowers and a card. At that moment, Jang Ho called to report that King was still alive. Furious, Vivian Castle threw the bouquet away. She took her gun to look for any followers but found none. Meanwhile, Dennis drove the Macau man and dumped him at the police station. He told Officer Seo that it was the intelligence officer Han Cheon who had set the trap to steal the money. Soon after, the intelligence officers arrived and presented a photo of Cheon. He confirmed that this was the person who had deceived him. Officer Seo ordered the anti-drug team to search Cheon's house, where they found a briefcase for drug in the safe. Here on the island, as Cheon regained consciousness, Officer Seo arrived with an arrest warrant for him. Michael monitored everything on the screen, wanting to see how he would escape justice. Even if he escapes justice, he can't regain his position. I want to see General Han suffer. He values his family's honor more than his life. I want him to fall to the lowest level of hell. At that moment, Officer Seo was interrogating Cheon. She presented a witness for him to confront, but Cheon claimed he didn't know who he was. It's all the work of that bastard. You need to release me quickly, there's no time left. The next day, the intelligence agency brought in a witness, Professor Han. He stated that while taking photos, he saw Cheon lying in an empty lot on the island. As soon as he left the station, the professor called, saying he had done everything as instructed and begged to have his daughter released. The next day, Officer Seo received a call to release Cheon because a witness had confirmed his innocence. Furious, she threw her phone and ordered Cheon's release, restoring his position as the head of the intelligence agency. Cheon was released and returned home to see his father, who told him to find Seo Hyewon. In the past, he was my right-hand man. If Choi Hae-ryong's child is still alive, it must be because he saved them. Meanwhile, Jean Bobae was reading about Officer Choi Hae-ryong from 25 years ago when Cheon called to arrange a meeting. I met Kin. He wants to kill me because I want to catch him. He is not a person like that. She showed the newspaper about the arson that killed Officer Choi Hae-ryong's family. I've investigated everything. The person who should have died at 7 was still alive. What do you want to say now? I just wanted to know the truth about why that person did that, and then she left. Two old men met to discuss finding Seo Hyewon. If his sister is still alive, we will use her to catch him. Chanli overheard and asked why Dad did that, then left in frustration. Cheon also sent someone to search for Seo Hyewon's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Michael told Dennis he would help someone. Lee Min-soo, 40, works at a rice restaurant but was previously an important employee at Jalmi Hotel. Secondly, manager Kim Tae-ho also worked at Jalmi Hotel 3 years ago. Another person, Han Cho-soo, has a company that was once a branch of the Jalmi Group. He deeply hated Chang-ho, who is always trying to deal with him. Meanwhile, Jean Bobae went to meet the person who wrote the newspaper to ask questions. She also recorded evidence. He stated that, in reality, only 2 adult bodies were found at that time. The police report stated that the entire family had permanently left together, while Chang En-I was drunk. She stood on the street hoping Michael would appear. Suddenly, someone ran up and pulled her aside. Seeing her scream, he asked who she was. Without answering, he knocked her out and carried her away. On the other side, Mr. Seo Hyewon was sleeping when he suddenly woke up, startled by a scene from 25 years ago. He saw his daughter with her hand on her throat, pressing down. I never expected that the one who harmed my parents and caused my father's situation is you. I can never forgive you. He panicked and woke up, realizing it was just a dream. The next day, Cheon called her dad to report that she had found Seo Hyewon. Now I will go there. As Cheon was leaving, Seo Hyewon arrived at the station to look for his daughter. He was waiting for his daughter when he noticed documents about Choi Hae-ryong and Choi Kang-ta. Suddenly, his daughter walked in. He asked why she was still investigating that case, but she said, Dad, it's fine. I'm busy, but I'll take you out to eat soon. At that moment, Cheon arrived at his house and saw a picture of Officer Seo. He wondered if Seo Mi-soo was Seo Hyewon's daughter. At the police station, as he said goodbye to his daughter and was leaving, Dennis drove up and told him to get in the car. Dennis brought him to meet Michael. Do you remember me, Seo Hyewon? He looked at Michael in fear and collapsed. Michael reached out to help him. He recalled the moment he saved 2 children from the sea of flames. Did you save me 25 years ago and take me to the orphanage? He remembered the moment when the child was placed in front of the orphanage. "It was you who burned down my house, wasn't it? Speak up." He trembled and knelt down, asking him to forgive him. "Then where is my sister?" But he lied, saying that the boy's sister was already dead. In anger, he aimed his gun at him, saying, "Because of you, my mother and sister are gone." But Michael, in tears, couldn't shoot his enemy in front of him and walked away. At that moment, Bobby arrived to talk to Officer Seo about King. She asked Officer Seo to let her meet the officer who supervised the case from 25 years ago. But she angrily ordered Jean to take Bobby outside. She ordered her subordinate to find the officer in charge of the case from that year and bring all related documents back. At that moment, Che-John called to invite her out for a beer. King was CIA's employee in Europe. He had done many things, but I assured you I would catch him. Her health has been very good since she was young. That's right, my dad said I've never been to the hospital since I was a child. Che-John thought he did bad things to earn money for his daughter's heart treatment. So, while she was out, Che-John took the cup she drank from and requested a test with Michael's blood. Along with that, he requested a test using the hair sample from Seo Hyun that he had intentionally collected at his house. Seo Hyun sadly took the picture of her daughter and asked himself what he should do. "Because you have become a police officer, while your brother is a criminal." He cried out in agony and apologized to his daughter. And suddenly there was another sound outside. When he opened the door, he saw Han. He used a rope to harm Seo Hyun, asking where Choi Hae-ryung's son was now. "At that time, I left him at the orphanage, so I don't know." "Then where was Kang Ta's sister?" "I really need that girl." "That girl was dead. If it was, then you should go meet that girl." Suddenly, Michael appeared to rescue him. "Why, you saved me a lot, but I owed you a lot. I have already forgiven you because you saved my life 25 years ago." When Michael turned to leave, he intended to tell him about his sister but decided against it, fearing she would be in danger. The next day, the two old men sat down to talk. Han said that Kang Ta's sister had already gone to meet the elders, and the plan to catch that girl failed. At that moment, Che-John arrived and said that tomorrow they would know whether his sister was still alive. And Chang En-I came to find Jean Bo-Bei, but Jean Bo-Bei said that she hadn't seen him. In anger, Chang Li rushed at Jean Bo-Bei, believing she dared to take her man. Her mother came to prevent that. After a moment, she was about to rush in to hit again when the bodyguard grabbed her and carried her away. In terms of Michael, he came to meet the minister secretly to ask about IT City's plan. As the boss said, "Our IT City will become an international city." This project was challenging, so I would try my best to gather documents and submit to the president for handling. I would try my best not to make you disappointed. You have been in South Korea for a while, and your lack of contact has made me very worried. My goal was to keep our relationship a secret from others. You just focused on managing this project. I would take care of other matters. Here, Dennis and Mr. Thibault gathered 3 people who had previously been associated with the Chang En-I group, with the main task of taking them down. Once completed, each person would have one wish, and we would fulfill it. At that moment, Anthony entered and introduced himself as the one who would change the appearances of the 3 individuals. Thus, the transformation began with hairstyling, massages, shopping for clothes, and various accessories. Michi sat and followed them throughout the screen. Dennis asked if Vivian Castle knew about the investment in IT City. "I didn't know either. I've heard that Vivian Castle might return, but I didn't want to forgive her." Meanwhile, Che-John received the test results. Kang Ta's sister had been found. He brought the test results back for his father to see. Seo Hun's daughter was Kang Ta's sister. After that, Che-John went to meet Sel Hyun and said she was from the intelligence agency. I can fire him that Seo Misu was Kang Ta's sister, which made him anxious. He proposed to Vivian Castle, but she promised to think it over. Suddenly she received a call informing that Michael's sister was alive. Charon also went to meet Jean Bo-Bei to tell her that Michael's sister was still alive. Jean Bo-Bei hurried back to inform Mr. Thibault about this. Mr. Thibault reported to the boss what Che-John had said. Dennis advised him not to listen to what Che-John had said. It was just a trap that he created. I had a feeling that my sister was still alive. He suddenly called Seo Jun. He required to meet him at 2 p.m. tomorrow in the park. And that time, Che-John set up a trap for tomorrow meeting. The next day Michael came to meet Seo Hyun. From the distance he saw him sitting with a girl. Michael approached slowly and placed his hand on the shoulder. Surprisingly, it was Vivian Castle. Michael turned around and realized it was trap for him. At that time, Che-John appeared. Chang Ho also ran over with his accomplices, while Vivian Castle aimed a gun at Michael. "I didn't think that we were rivals. I didn't imagine that you had betrayed me twice." He punched her, which made she fall down afterwards. Chang Ni's bodyguard jumped in to engage him in a fistfight. Meanwhile, the 2 old men were pleased to know that Michael had fallen into the trap. At that time the secretary brought a gift and said that it was sent by their son. He opened the gift and saw a bomb. He opened the card to find a note inside that said if Kin died, the gift would explode. He called Che-John to warn her not to let Kin die, as a bomb disguised as a gift was in front of them. Hearing that, Che-John loaded their guns. On the other side, were still beating each other. Lastly, he managed to take down the toughest opponent. Just then, Dennis shot the rope, allowing the boss to swing down and escape. They chased after, shooting at the car continually. In the car, Michael was tying up the secretary of the John Me Corporation. After a chase, Dennis stopped the car to let him out as a decoy. They looked and saw a person in a mask and dressed like Kin. He immediately opened fire, taking the masked man down on the spot. When he went to remove the mask, he discovered it was his own secretary. Dennis asked how the boss planned to deal with Vivian Castle. She had betrayed him twice. As soon as she got in the car, she was Michael telling her to set off until he told her to stop. Vivian Castle was driving but had a gun in her hand. Getting off the car, Michael asked her about her sister. "I couldn't say anything about your sister. So let's me take your own life." As he passed by, Vivian Castle pulled out her gun, but he quickly grabbed it. They fought hand to hand. When she no longer held on, he managed to rescue her. "I was guilty, please let me go." In the end, he couldn't let her fall and used all his strength to pull her up. "From now then, please disappear from my sight. I warned you this was also the last time I helped you." On this side, Che-John couldn't stand up after finishing his beer. Michael slowly walked away and warned him to be careful with that alcohol. He drank wine and waited for Che-John to conscious. He had drunk a type of poison called chloroxeth. "You couldn't be my rival and you couldn't kill me. I could deal with you whenever I want, but you were not my goal. If you wanted to cooperate, this antidote would be yours." The next day, the director went to the intelligence agency to find Che-John, but Chief CO didn't know where he was. He presented documents proving that Che-John was colluding with King. Now there was $5 million that were transferred to Sharon's account. You should define the relationship between King and Che-John. Additionally, the source of that money could not be overlooked. Afterwards, the police CO also received a call reporting that Sharon had been found. He ordered subordinates to arrest him. The police arrested the prison and found King's mask. Afterwards, the minister personally interrogated Che-John. He took out the picture of them when they were drinking wine together. Charon couldn't say anything. "For the sake of your father and your previous achievements, I will not file a lawsuit." Afterwards he came back home to ask him. "He made me lose everything. I had to catch him to take revenge this one." And Jean Bobby waited for Mr. Thibault and asked him whether Michael had seen his sister. "He got tricked by that guy Che-John again. I almost got into trouble before meeting my sister." Feeling worried, she called him but no one hung up. On CO's side, Hug Han had been secretly drugged and taken away by Che-John's secretary. Mr. Han tied him up and beat him badly. "You were the one who saved Troy Harryon's child. If you did not obey, your daughter would be harmed." Meanwhile, police called his father but he didn't reply. Suddenly, someone called and said she needed to come home because her father was there. She went to John's house to ask her dad why he was there. "Dad has known this gentleman for a long time. During this time, please let him stay here with me." Police CO didn't suspect and left away. "I begged you to spare her because she was innocent. She was Troy Kong Ta's daughter, so why had she been innocent?" On this side, Anthony was teaching 3 new employees how to play golf. Anthony complained to Mr. Thibault that he couldn't teach this group of people, and then taught them how to enjoy Western wine, but they were drunk sooner. Anthony looked at them and could only sigh in frustration. Meanwhile, they were mentioning IT City. Song president came in. He said that tomorrow was the opening ceremony of IT City, so you all remembered to come. The next day, Michael stood above, looking down at the entire scene of the upcoming opening ceremony of IT City. He came to watch the children writing their wishes to hang on the wishing tree, and he also had a wish to hang on. At that moment, 2 elderly men also arrived to praise the grandeur of the opening ceremony. Vivian Castle also held arms with Chong Ho to visit the event. Chong Ho asked her to make a wish on the tree. When she wrote the wish, he recalled when Michael saved her, and she wrote that Michael would forgive her. A little later, the 2 elderly men approached the director of IT City. They talked very amiably. At that time, Chong Ho received a phone call that Vivian Castle would come back to Seoul alone. Suddenly, he saw Michael walking by, so he ran after him. In the restroom, Chong Ho met him there. Although Michael had said he wasn't there to fight, but he continued to act weak, and as a result, he was overpowered. Michael asked him where they were hiding Seoul Hyun. Chong Ho said that it was in Chairman Han's house. And 2 elderly men saw from the upstairs to downstairs. "Whether by threats or persuasion, we just need to take IT City from him. The Haiduong campus was the world's largest. We just needed to secure it. We could catch the Republic of Korea's economy." While Police Seoul was working, Che-John called and told her that his health was not fine. He then went in to see Seoul Hyun. "Now let's go outside. You need to cooperate with us, or else your daughter will be in trouble." Outside, Michael broke into Che-John's house and he gagged Sol Hyun, which prevented him from saying. Michael walked in and asked if my sister was still alive. Che-John stepped out and said he couldn't speak because I had sewn his mouth shut. Let me tell you something. Your sister, Seomi Soo, is the police officer you met. Compared to dying at my hands, you deserve dying at your sister's hands. One while later, she would come here. Seomi Soo rang the doorbell outside. Choi-John fired a shot at Sol Hyun, then pointed the gun at Michael. Hearing the gunshot, she rushed in to find her father lying motionless on the floor. It was him who harmed him. In anguish, she aimed her gun at Michael and asked why he did this, and he just saw his sister angry. Choi-Jun sat next to her and urged her to shoot quickly. Seomi Soo, in tears, couldn't pull the trigger. In anger, he rushed forward and kicked Che-John, but when he looked up and saw the police arriving, he quickly left. If Seomi Soo was my sister, the intelligence agency would have information. Alright, he would check Che-John's computer. Vivian Castle called her secretary to book a flight to Hawaii for the following week, stating that she would not be returning. Chang-ho came in and asked why she had gone to Hawaii alone. And what about his marriage proposal? Vivian Castle saw him without saying anything. The next morning, news channels reported that he had harmed Seo Hyo-eun. Bo B's mother turned to her angrily and said that she would call the police if he appeared. Bo Pe could only lower her head in silence. Mr. Tae-bo believed that the news might not be true. Michael was at the basement and remembered when he had met Seomi. At that moment, Dennis came in and gave him the documents that Seomi was his sister. Thus, the image of the innocent little sister, who had suffered so much, resurfaced. On this side he looked her father's picture and cried in pain. But when he came back, there was a hidden like king, who wanted to attack her. Michael Che-Jun appeared just in time to save her. On the way he told that although he wasn't a police anymore, he wanted to catch King. Right now, he was looking for his sister. We just need to take advantage of this. Meanwhile, Chang-ho informed Vivian Castle that Michael's sister was Officer Seo. Coming back with Jean Bo B, she went to the police station to meet Seomi Soo. At that moment, Officer Seo said, I am Choi Kong-hai, the sister of Choi Kong. Officer Seo told Bo B to help her meet his brother. At home, Jean Bo Pe told Mr. Tae-bo that Michael's sister wanted to see him. When Michael was working, Jean Bo B arrived. She said that Officer Seo also knew that he was her brother. You should meet your sister and clarify everything to her. Afterwards the police Seo received a bouquet of flowers. Inside was a card inviting her to meet at 3 p.m. in the park, and she called Che-John to inform him about the 3 p.m. appointment. As the meeting time approached, Che-Jun had arranged a team to catch Michael. Dennis along with him and monitored everything. When his sister appeared, he watched from a distance and told Dennis to drive away. He went to meet the investors about IT City. We will turn this place into the largest resort paradise. Everyone all recognized Michael's abilities. Outside, the minister said that Hanmi organization and Jeonmi organization wanted to win IT City. Later, they would egret it. I just ask that you don't entrust important tasks to them. Seomi Soo returned to the office and felt frustrated and angry. Che-Jun came inside. She said that he was the person who harmed her father, so she would act on her own. You should go. So Che-John gave her GPS box and told her to bring along. If he appeared, activate the GPS so I could track his location. Meanwhile, two chairmen felt worried when seeing the shares were going down. This made the Japan's president feel angry. If it didn't return to the original state, he would withdraw the investment. And then he required to find another to restore the current shares. The guy Michael trained has infiltrated the Jeonmi and Hanmi systems to sabotage them. And at that time his phone rang. There was someone who asked him to come to President Hanmi's room. After negotiating the price, he executed all operations on the system, and the share diagram of both two corporations were going up. When Chang and I approached the elevator, she suddenly saw Michael. He gave her a bouquet of flowers for the returning days. He kissed Chang and I and told her to come back to her normal life. So, will we meet again, Michael? Of course. Michael, don't leave me since I love you so much. When both chairmen were discussing the plan to acquire IT City when Che-John arrived. At that time, Chang and I also happily came back home. Everyone saw her happiness and found it quite strange. Could it be that you've met Michael? Didn't I say he was dead? Why could I see the dead person? Coming back to the police station, Xiaomi Su received an anonymous CD. When she opened it, it recalled the incident 25 years ago. It also included Kangta's adoption papers and her birth certificate. After that, she drove over, and Michael got in, telling her to take him to a quiet place. At the same time, she pressed the GPS button to let Che-John know. When Michael got out of the car, she took out her gun to check the bullets. She got off the car and asked him why he had harmed his father. He just saw his sister without saying anything. Tears streaming down her face, she aimed the gun at him. He was too painful to see the sister he had lost for 25 years. He gently held Kangi's hand, but in the end, she pulled the trigger. He angrily pushed her down and then vanished. Furious, she called out for Kangta, but he just hid in a corner, watching her. But he was aimed a gun. If you resisted, your sister would be thrown into the river. Thus, Kangta had no choice but to accept being beaten badly by them. On the other side, Xiaomi returned to the station and ordered an investigation of the hospital. Who came to the hospital for treatment must report to her. Right now Michael was captured and tied up at the chairman's house. Che-John furiously attacked Michael. Meanwhile, Xiaomasu went to find Jinbo Pe to ask where Kangta was. Her mother heard and ran out to ask, "Why did you still contact with that murderer? Was there really no other man left in the world?" But Jinbo said that she didn't know where he was. Back with Michael, two chairmen felt pleased when they had captured Michael. Then Chairman Han asked everyone to come out. He stood up and asked who wanted to expose all the affairs to the public. "Did you think that it could spoil us? Then why don't you just kill me? Like father, like son. Years ago, we didn't intend to kill your father, but he was too stubborn and always adhered to his principles. With no other option, we had to deal with him. Each of the four of us gave him a stab. Now, I will make you experience the same fate your father went through." Han tortured him and forced him to reveal the location of his secret documents, but he remained determined not to tell him. At that moment, Dennis was very worried because he had lost contact with his boss. Mr. Thibault returned to explain to Jean Bobet the reason why Michael had to do it. Because years ago, the four, Chairman Kong, the chief officer, Chairman Chang and General Han had harmed Kangta's parents. Chang Ho joyfully rushed to inform Vivian Castle that Michael had been captured. But when she asked where he was locked up, he didn't say anything. But when she asked where he was being held, he didn't say. He said that Michael was currently locked up in the basement of his house. She said nothing, gently touching his cheek with the ring, while Chang Ho fell into a deep sleep. Dennis felt worried and didn't know where his boss was. "I received news that he has been locked up in the basement of Chairman Chang. We have to rescue him right now." On this side, Xiaomi was received a video that Kezan had caught Michael. She ordered everyone to head to Chairman Chang's house to search. Dennis and Mr. Thibault also disguised themselves as utility workers and went to Chairman Chang's house. The guard requested to inspect the toolbox. After that, the two were allowed to enter the house. At that moment, the police car also arrived, and Xiaomasu went in to meet Chazon and Chang Ho. She gave the picture where he was, but Chang Ho pretended not to know. She ordered everyone to search the entire place. The police came to find, but they didn't see no one. So she let everyone seek for outside. On the other side, Dennis and Mr. Thibault also went to the ground floor. When Mr. Thibault opened the door, he saw the boss hanging there. Police was also informed of going to the ground floor, but she arrived, no one was there. Jean Bo received Thibault's phone. He rushed to meet Michael. Seeing his serious injury, she was too worried. She held his hands and told him to let her besides him. Michael smiled and shook his hands. "Besides me was very dangerous." And then he asked Mr. Thibault why he had been injured so badly. It was due to Che-John. He was so cruel. The police sat and saw the picture of his father when he was shot. Suddenly, she saw a board recording the blood type. She told Van Boer to bring the documents to her. According to the documents, she called the department to inquire about Seo Mu's documents. She was informed by the hospital that the child had died during the heart transplant surgery at the age of 3. Police Seo walked along the street and asked herself if she had been dead. "Daddy, who I was." The next day, she met with Chairman Han to ask about the case from 25 years ago involving Officer Choi Haryong. Kim believes that his father was wrongfully accused. 25 years ago, I and Police Choi had investigated about the poisoning case together. But at that time, the person who accused Officer Choi was him. It was true that I couldn't accept this corrupt police officer. So that was it. She bowed her head and left without saying. But when she got to the car, someone wearing a mask came up, covered her mouth, and stabbed her, causing her to faint. He took her on the shoulder, but Michael appeared. "I had warned you not to harm my sister." He angrily fought him in a one-on-one match, knocking him unconscious. He felt anxious and carried his sister to the hospital. At that moment, the image of the two children carrying each other came to mind. Finally, Police Seo also became conscious in the hospital. She heard the nurse who had said that the guardian was Troy Kong Ta. Police Seo rushed to call him. "Didn't think that saving me means you had escaped your guilt. I had promised my father that I would arrest the person who had killed him. But he didn't say anything and left." Back at the base, Dennis didn't understand why the boss didn't mention he was her brother, and explained that you didn't kill her father to resolve the misunderstanding. "I have never regretted what I've done, but in front of a police officer, I feel insecure." The next day Michael made a speech about IT City. Inside, there was also the person he had trained to infiltrate. IT City was a demanding project. That place will use tourism assets to have an impact worldwide. That was the vacation resort that you had been looking forward to. I wanted every superior should love and enjoy this one. This city could make everyone pleased. At the end of the speech, everyone applauded loudly. The chairman Chang was talking with Kim T. Cheng Ho rushed into. The chairman focused on gathering Chinese investors to give a speech about ETCT. Then two chairmen sat down to discuss matter with the chairman, the Japanese company and Kanya's representative. The Japanese side also introduced them an investor. He was from Japan's sides. The department king had been acquainted with British business for a long time. She also introduced that he was international lawyer managing my assets. She said that she wanted to invest in a piece of land worth about 800 billion. Hearing from her, both of them felt excited. At the police station someone delivered the test results from. Che John's associate opened it and reported to it. At the basement, Dennis told his boss to stop by the villa since I had sent it to your sister. When police CO waited in the villa, Michael came in. Outside, Che John also appeared. Do you think I was on, sister? It was just a plan to make you deceive. Please recall this. Childhood memories with parents and the time spent playing with my brother by the beach. But she couldn't believe that she was his younger sister. She handed him the test results. Is it much easier to change this one? Outside, Che John, following his father's instructions, had to find a way to make his sister turn against him. If Michael was dealt by them, his henchmen would reveal this to the public. Michael told his sister that on a day when it was snowing, they had built a snowman together while waiting for his dad. And on that day, they had harmed our father. I had witnessed it clearly. But she still didn't believe him and pulled out her gun, declaring, I am Selmi Su, not Troy Kong Hai. He had said that if our father had been dead, he would protect her and his mother. Due to this promises, I just came back. Charon hoped her to shut at him. Seeing her hesitate, he rushed in and shot Michael. With the advanced skillful, he dodged his wild gunfire. So he forced Officer CO to be the heart and made him step outside. Finally he had no choice and stepped out in front of him. Why had you hesitated to kill him? It was him who had harmed your father. The one who harmed your father was not me, but him. Please, you should believe him. She was confused. She raised her gun, aiming it at Che John, then turned to point it at Michael. They remained until the police arrived and arrested them away. After that, he saw Che John and raised her gun, aimed at him. Please explain what had happened before. He knew that this was an unfortunate circumstance. Since your GPS was on, I could know you. And then she came out to take him to the station. In the car, Michael secretly unlocked the handcuffs with the key that the doctor had given him earlier. Behind, Sharon chased after them, firing at the police car. He wanted to deal with Michael as soon as possible. At that moment, the car was uncontrolled and careened the slope. Sharon got off car with a gun. I would kill you this time sooner. Little did he hear the police sound, he had to retreat. Michael took his sister outside. Dennis and Mr. Tebow asked him whether he was fine. He told him to rescue everyone in the car. Sharon informed his father that everything failed. He was furious and couldn't accept this, so he planned to use the gun to end his life. But he didn't have the courage to do that. The next day, Jean Bo Bei met with Chairman Han to inquire about the case of Choi Hae-ryong from 25 years ago, but she received bad news that his father was Chairman Chang. Meanwhile, when police CO was drinking alcohol, Jean Bo Bei came. Officer CO told Jean Bo Bei that he couldn't consider Choi Kong-ta as his brother. I just had only a father. Officer CO, it's time for you to wake up now. In the incident that happened 25 years ago, 4 of them had hidden an important secret. I would investigate due to Michael. This was the way I had chosen. Officer CO said that in seeking revenge, he gradually lost himself. I could not use wrongful actions to combat wrongful events. At the base, Dennis said that today there would be a meeting about investment area. Chairman Chang would make a special speech about IT City. Here, as Chairman Chang was preparing to speak, Michael's associates shouted that there was a fire, and everyone rushed in chaos. Dennis ran over, stating the wheelchair couldn't go down, so he would help Chairman Kong escape. Just as Dennis was taking Chairman Kong away, Michael came and prevented their guards. He took him to the escape ladder and then left. Outside was a lot of reporters. They told that Chairman Kong had been still inside. Quickly save the people, it's such a coincidence and a surprise. He no longer needed the wheelchair and ran outside on his own 2 legs. He didn't need the wheelchair and ran outside on his own legs. The reporters hurried and took lots of pictures and the news spread rapidly. The story of Chairman Han was also taken back again. At that time, he was under investigation for misappropriating public funds, but because he had saved the soldier, and he stepped on the landmine, which injured his legs. From that, he was recognized as a hero man. And of course, the investigation also put to an end. But little did anyone know that today's story revealed General Han had deceived the public. Mr. Chang also felt dissatisfied with Mr. Han. He was surprised that he would act in such a way. Suddenly the guard informed that Chang Ni was arrested. Meanwhile Michael was taking her around for relaxing. In the hospital, Mr. Han stared at the new coverages about himself. He was angry and took the DVD away. Che-John came back and asked if it was the truth or not. Because he was suspected of misappropriating public funds, this drama unfolded. At that time, my father had no other choice. If reported to the military court, he would face serious consequences. And the man who led his father to escape the ladder was one of the king's henchmen. Han knew that my father valued his honor, so he smeared mud on his reputation. You should find ways to deal with King at all costs. Chairman Chang was discussing stock prices with Director Lee when he suddenly coughed. Han was worried because of Chairman Han's scandal, which caused investors to withdraw their funds. Suddenly, Che-John called for Chang Ho to meet Vivian Castle. While Che-John was with Vivian Castle, Chang Ho came inside. Che-John told Chang Ho that Vivian Castle was Kin's right-hand person before leaving. Chang Ho, in pain, asked, "Vivian Castle, it can't be true, can it?" Michael came to deal with 3 of thugs aside the yard. After that, Chang Ho went outside and was also restrained by him. When Mr. Chaej went out to look for his son and was knocked out with a punch, they hung 2 of them where he had once imprisoned. Michael used the whip, causing them be in fear. Michael asked him if Jean Bo Bei was your daughter or not. Chang Ho asked in surprise, "How can that little reporter be your daughter?" "I didn't know that daughter, but if I died, she would die too, I didn't care. He was a heartless person who could gamble with his daughter's life." "Someone like you was dirty," he said before walking away. In the car, he called Dennis to ask him to confirm if anything had happened on the Bob side. Also, check to see if Vivian Castle was involved. Dennis wondered why they needed to confirm Vivian Castle at Jean Bob's house. Mr. Thibault told the boss that he had ordered them to protect the child. From now on, she needed to be more careful. Michael came back to the base and was informed that Jean Bo Bei was still safe but Vivian Castle had been arrested. It was Basco who had taken her. Here, Vivian Castle was tied up. She asked Basco if he had known King in Las Vegas or not. "No, I had not known him." "Well, whatever they offer you over there, I can match it. The contract had been made and I wouldn't betray just due to money." At that moment, Dennis was also trying to locate Vivian Castle. Officer Co still focused on investigating the relationships of those involved. She reviewed the photos taken when her father shot. Vamber came and informed that it was difficult to confirm the murderer had been King, since there had so much wounds and glue on his mouth. The police CO recalled the moment when he met his father at Han's house and recalled moments when he had been killed. She thought that if Kin wasn't responsible, it had to be Che-John. And when Che-John got in the car, she appeared and aimed her gun at him. She also took the gun that he brought along. "What if, by chance, your father killed my father, and you killed my adoptive father? What would happen then? Please go ahead and shoot, and if you couldn't confirm, get out of the car. I promise to carry out the arrest warrant to achieve your aim." Michael stayed in the car and monitored everything. Upon his arrival, he came out. "I didn't know what had happened 25 years ago. If they had committed a crime, I would carry out the law to catch them. It also applied to you. If you had committed a crime, I would also arrest you." On this side, Chairman Chang and his son are still tied up in the basement. They were doing their best to call for help from the basement. The security outside heard them and hurried in to untie them. In terms of Chang and I, when she got up, Michael disappeared. He was worried since he could let her alone. He suddenly walked in from outside. She happily hugged him. "You've been by my side all evening, haven't you?" He agreed and that made her so happy. She invited him to go out for breakfast, but Michael declined because he had a meeting this morning. He kissed Chang Ni's hands followed with a ring. This made her excitedly and feel much happier. At the hospital, Chairman Ha received a call requesting a board meeting. At that moment, John walked in. He told his son to go with him to the company. Arriving at the party, he asked who wanted to cut in line first. "This time, our company's reputation had been damaged significantly. Only you took this opportunity to temporarily salvage a bit from the past." He angrily and asked them who had been organized and set up this organization. "Now I have come back to life. 15 years ago, I had to rely on a wheelchair to get around. Right now I could stand up steadily." He introduced the next successor as his only son, Han Che-John. Everyone seemed dissatisfied but no one could refuse that. Che-John took the chairman's seat and promised to make the corporation strong. And at Chang House, she had been trapped in the basement by King. Coming back home, Chang and I heard that. She quickly said that he had spent all day with him at the hotel. It might not have been a trap after all, his father said. It might be because she was sick, so they had the bodyguard take her and lock her in her room. Dennis along with Thibault was watching them at the base. Mr. Thibault was curious why the boss was dating with chairman's daughter, because she was also part of this strategic plan. At that moment, Michael walked in and asked about Vivian Castle and Dennis informed her. He still hadn't determined the location of Vivian Castle, and he mentioned that they hadn't seen her return yet. As Vivian Castle was held captive, Jang Ho entered and asked about Michael's whereabouts. She teased Ho, AMD smirked. The two old men were discussing strategies to deal with the crisis. Chairman Han proposed that Chairman Chang use his daughter, Jean Bo-bei, to lure him in. Meanwhile, Che-John was working when the police arrived. At the police station, CO showed a photo of Che-John's father when he was shot. One more time, she had to concede to him. She didn't know what the person who burnt his house was his adoptive father. Officer CO felt extremely confused. She recalled what Che-John had said and then called to arrange a meeting with Jean Bo-bei. Here, Jean Bo-bei advised her to meet with her brother to find out the truth. Meanwhile, Chairman Chang and his son brought gifts to Jean Bo-bei's house. Her mother ran out and was startled to see them. Seeing this, Mr. Thibault called to inform Jean Bo-bei. While waiting for Jean Bo-bei to return, the father and son enjoyed the treats and then fell asleep right there. Angry, her mother poured water on them and chased them away. Michael took Chang and I for a walk in the IT city. After that, he went to meet Jean Bo-bei. She intended to tell him that her father was Chairman Chang, but Michael said he already knew. No matter what, he was still my father. I can't accept a father like that, so I've decided to investigate to the end. But still, I wanted to apologize to you, Michael. He looked at her in silence and then embraced her. At that moment, Che-John arrived to see Vivian Castle and asked where Kin was. He was wildly attacking her relentlessly. Meanwhile, Chairman Chang was asking Mr. Kim to drive up the stock price. Mr. Kim suggested that the father and son should sell all their shares, but he was concerned that if they sold everything, they might face problems later. Chang Ho advised his father to not worry because they still had 3% of Chang Ni's shares, so it would be fine, and he decided to sell all shares of them. Dennis informed Michael that they had sold off their shares. Under orders from his boss, Dennis began to buy back all those shares. Che-John used the device to torment Vivian Castle. He stabbed into her flesh, causing excruciating pain, and all she could do was scream. Finally she couldn't endure and revealed the ID code that could access. At that time Michael also received the message. If today King didn't appear at the square, he could not see Vivian Castle anymore. Thinking for a long time, he decided to save Vivian Castle. Despite Dennis's repeated advice against it, he still decided to go. He asked his boss, the doctor, who was responsible for the fatalities. At the square, Vivian Castle waited Michael to rescue her. She recalled the first time he rescued her from kidnappers, and they had practiced swordsmanship and then kissed each other. But she had betrayed him painfully. But he didn't kill her and also helped her again. She didn't want to recall since she felt more guilty. They felt anxious since they couldn't see Michael coming. So Che-John pointed a gun at Vivian Castle's head, demanding that Michael show up. If you didn't not appear, I would kill her. When they were exchanging, she saw Chang Ho aiming a gun at Michael. She didn't think a lot and rushed to block the bullet for Michael. Before her death, she asked him to forgive her and told him that I love you. Michael was painful and held her tightly, shouted that Vivian Castle please wake up, but she couldn't be conscious again. Furious, he laid Vivian Castle down and stepped forward, aiming his gun at Jang Ho. At that time, Che-John also aimed the gun at him. Michael ordered Chang Ho to pick up her. I would never forgive you. Dennis drove a car and threw Chang Ho on the street. On the way Michael held Castle in anguish. He recalled unforgettable memories with her, and some loving words for him but he always rejected. Che-John came back to meet his father. He told him to stop dealing with King because he didn't want to lose his son. Che-John didn't accept this. I would solve him at all costs. At the base, Michael came out and declared that the time for fun was over. Blood debts must be paid in blood. After that, Mr. Thibault returned to inform Jean Bo-bei about Vivian Castle's situation. Then, Chairman Chang and his son quietly arrived. He asked Jean Bo-bei to forgive him because he wanted to find his lost child. Suddenly, her mother came home and told them to get out of her house immediately. Quick-witted, he ran after her into the room and knelt down, asking for her forgiveness. Feeling angry, she asked him to tell what he wanted. He told that the one who wanted to kill him was King, but King was acquainted with Jean Bo-bei. Outside, Jean Bo-bei angrily questioned him. Are you asking me to beg Michael to spare your life? He just needed King to promise that he would not kill them. And then they got on the car and came back home. In the car, Chairman Chang remarked that that girl was truly heartless. Back at the base, Michael was visited by Jean Bo-bei. He drove him outside and they enjoyed the stroll together. She said that she wanted to be next to him. Jean Bo-bei, I hadn't done anything for you and I couldn't be by your side. I hoped that we would be by our side one day. Michael smiled at her and they kissed each other. And then she returned to his villa and he fell asleep in her arms. The next day at the police station, Vanber rushed in with documents and said, a few days ago, all the computers in the data room were breached by hackers. The cameras also failed to record at that time. Officer Seo recalled the day she had seen Che John leaving. She went to meet Chairman Han and his son to ask about the events from 25 years ago regarding her adoptive father. He told her that it was Seo Hyun who had burned down the house for Harry and then adopted her. But she didn't believe and promised to investigate all. Chairman Han angrily ordered his son to start dealing with this girl. Meanwhile, Chairman Chong and his family were sitting in the office when Jean Bo-bae walked in. Chong and I wondered why she was there. He told Chong Ho to take her home. Bo-bae advised that if he had done something wrong, he should honestly confess to him. I can only help you up to this point and then I will leave. Chong Ho ran in and asked what she said. Dad. She told us to meet him and plead for forgiveness. So, they met Chairman Han and asked to go plead for forgiveness together. But Chairman Han informed them that King's sister was already investigating our case. If we confessed at this time, we would end up in prison for a long time. Now we just had a path to choose. While Officer Seo was working, she received a call that Michael was injured and asking her to help. She felt worried and followed their directions. Upon arriving, she saw a man who was wearing black mask. She came to ask if his injury was serious or not. But when Officer Seo approached, the masked person attacked her. When the masked attacker kicked Officer Seo, she quickly drew her gun and ordered him to take off his mask. It turned out that the masked person was actually a girl. I came here to catch King, so if I just capture you, he will show up. She raised her hands and pulled out a hairpin. She punched Officer Seo, which made her dazed. You had been poisoned and your body was weak, you needn't exert yourself. Officer Seo, still weak, struggled to lunge at her to fight back. She was kicked and fell back onto the chair. She approached nearer and controlled Officer Seo. When she wanted to stab her, Michael came in time. He hit her, causing her to fall. Scared, she immediately ran away. During his fight, he was wounded by his hairpin. She felt worriedly bandaged his wound and advised him to go to the hospital for checkup. Michael said, "No need, I'm a super scion. I met with Chairman Han and told him that I would reinvestigate the case, so he wanted harm me. Kong Hai, they were very dangerous. You shouldn't get involved in. Let me deal with them. I begged you, please didn't seek revenge anymore, let the law deal with them." At that moment, Dennis drove up to help Michael. In the car, Dennis gave him the antidote to drink. After he begged Jean Bo-bae and then they attacked Officer Seo. After that, he went to meet Chong and I. She took out a box containing 2 watches. She had specially bought it for him, putting the watch on his wrist and extending her hand for him to put on the other one. Chani replied that she was sorry, but she didn't pay attention to Michael's apology, and happily handed him the documents that he asked her to retrieve. Meanwhile, at Zonmi Company, Mr. Kim entered to present the profit documents to Chairman Chong and his son. He told them that the results would be available by tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Kong told that they had to let Mr. Kim take over all. Now we have to go to an urgent meeting. At the Zonmi Corporation board meeting, the shareholders demanded that Chairman Chong resign, and he said that with his 48% stake and his daughter's 3%, totaling 51%, he would always the largest one. At that moment, the chairwoman Call entered and told he held 17%, which made them shocked. He angrily waited for her daughter and asked her. He asked if she had sold all her shares. She said that she hadn't sold any shares, but with only 3%, why was he making a fuss like this? It was just due to your little shares, the company owner was not ours. Chairman Chong angrily shouted at the top of his lungs. Chong, worried, explained that Michael wanted to reconcile with him, which is why she had given him her shares. Mr. Chong could only cry out in pain. Chong and I felt painful and couldn't imagine why he had done like that. She took her phone and called him, but he didn't reply. She burst into tears and she wondered if Michael had taken advantage of her. At the headquarters, Mr. Kim entered the stock data for Zhongmi Corporation, which looked very bleak. They excitedly high-fived and congratulated each other. Meanwhile, at Chang's company, they noticed that Mr. Kim was nowhere to be found. He turned on the computer to check and saw that the stock price had plummeted to rock bottom. Chairman Chong went to inform Chairman Han about company situation. Chong informed him that Michael had deceived them into taking all the shares, and that Kim had also tricked them. Now, the stock price had dropped dramatically. Chairman Han presented the file, stating that Ms. On 2 was clever. She said that the real estate would help us establish our reputation. She advised us to buy the real estate around the area. Suddenly, the secretary entered and handed him the property price analysis report. After reviewing it, Chairman Han trembled and asked, "What is this?" He called Ms. On 2 and found out that they had returned Japan. So, the 2 old men were left in disarray after falling for a huge deception, and they realized it had all been part of Kyung's plan. Chairman Chong, in tears, hugged Chairman Han and asked what they were supposed to do now. Meanwhile, Michael sat with Chairman Call and the chairman from Japan. Chairman Call said that Hanmi Corporation and Jalmi Corporation had been played by them. the market no longer belonged to them. Afterwards, Michael with Mr. Thibault invited them for drinks to express the gratitude. Without their help, this plan would have been very difficult to succeed. The next day, Michael introduced IT City to the investors. Chairman Han and Jiang Ho hid in a corner to observe. Afterward, they returned home to discuss their plan to sabotage IT City. And so, the media reported on Chairman Call and Michael. At that moment, Che Jalm called the minister. He wanted to prove that he didn't cooperate with King. At the Vanbrugh police station, Vanbrugh ran in to inform Officer Seo that the intelligence agency was investigating Michael and wanted them to apprehend him immediately. Meanwhile, Che John appeared in IT City. He saw Michael talking with the investors. Officer Seo was also on the way to IT City to carry out the arrest order. Meanwhile, Jiang Ho arrived and told them that they had been deceived by him. Michael was officially king. Hearing that, the investors were confused and decided to leave, leaving only Michael behind. After that, they sent their bodyguards to attack him. Just Michael fought them by himself. In the end, he was beaten badly by them. At the same time, Officer Seo arrived. She saw that he was being beaten fiercely. She recalled the love he had for his younger sister. His noble sacrifice and the dangers he faced came to her mind. They came and shouted loudly, but she didn't prevent. They panicked and rushed in chaos. She ran to her brother just as Che Jalm approached. "I wanted you to arrest your brother." She aimed the gun at him and found herself unable to arrest him. When he escaped, the officer Seo was anxious about his father and cried out for the ambulance. In the ambulance, Michael's hands were handcuffed. She urged him to stop and not seek revenge anymore. "I had said to you before, I would use law to deal with it." She insisted that they couldn't use the law to deal with them. "I would take away all the asset and their lives. If your revenge was successful, could our parents come back to life?" At that time, Che John was also following the ambulance to keep an eye on them. Michael told Kong Hai that he had unfinished business and couldn't be captured. "Don't hope that I'll let you go, that's absolutely not going to happen." At that moment, Van Bo called her to report that Che Jalm's car was closely following them. After thinking for a long time, Kong Hai suggested that he take her hostage to escape. "Because if you get caught now, all the blame will fall on you alone. If you were guilty, I would arrest you, but it was not time for that." She handed the gun and shot herself. Hearing the gunshot outside, the police immediately stopped the vehicle. Che Jalm also got out to take a look. Michael took Officer Seo hostage just as Dennis drove up and threw smoke grenades, filling the area with thick smoke. He thanked his sister and jumped into the car, speeding away. She followed his brother's car and murmured to herself, "Don't let yourself get caught again, Kong Hai." The two old men were worried as the investment in ETCT was about to end in a few days. Chairman Han said not to worry because that person was on his way to prison. Unexpectedly, Chairman Chang received a call informing him that Michael had escaped again. Kong Hai over here was being bandaged by the nurse. She picked up the phone and recalled what had just happened. He told her to use this phone to contact him anytime. Just as the nurse left, Che John entered. Since when did she start sacrificing her sister like that? Han stepped forward, pressed against Officer Seo, and told him to stop being a cop. Officer Seo pushed Han's hand away and said, "I knew that you were the one who killed my father. I would find the evidence to arrest you soon." She wondered how he could arrest her when he was about to be reinstated, and then he walked away. At the headquarters, her chairman told the investors that, if the boss didn't explain clearly, they would not invest anymore. Michael said that he couldn't explain and left away. The next day, at the Vanbrugh police station, she informed Officer Seo that she was about to be internally investigated, because Che John reported that she had intentionally released him. At home, Chairman Chang and his son regretted not listening to Jean Bo Bei, since she was my daughter and would let us go. Suddenly Chang and I came and asked him. Jean Bobbitt was Dad's daughter? He must have misheard, he thought he was the only one. Hearing this, Chang and I became annoyed and walked away. She went to see Bobbitt and asked where Michael was. She questioned why she was asking him, noting that sharing the same father didn't mean the Johnme Corporation would belong to her. "Now, I just want to know where Michael is." "What do you need to know that for?" "Because her father was the one who harmed his father 25 years ago." Jean Bo Bei felt angry and left away. Chang and I felt astonishing and realized he approached her due to the revenge. She then ran home to ask if her father had harmed Michael's father. That was why he had done that to her. It hadn't been late. You could meet Michael and beg him. So Chang Ho asked the bodyguard to take her back to her room, and Mr. Bio was drinking. And Jean Bo Bei asked him why he was sitting there. "Since I was worried about Michael." His plan had been spoilt. Michael sat sadly at the basement and recalled what his sister had said. "Dennis, Kong Hai and I are siblings. Can we be happy like we were 25 years ago?" Meanwhile, Chairman Han informed Chairman Chang that he had found the investor. It was the billionaire in America named David. At that moment, Chang and was heartbroken over what her father had done to Michael. At that moment, Chairman Chang called Mr. Call to return 17% stake he had purchased. Jean Bo-bei entered and said that for Michael it was not about revenge but about his father's honor. If the chairman wanted to tell the truth, would share it with Michael and ask for his forgiveness. So he agreed to recount the story from 25 years ago. At that moment, Jean Bobbitt secretly turned on the recording, and then she met Michael to handed him the phone. On the other side, when Officer Seo got off the car, there was someone punched her and took her away. He took her to Chairman Chang's house and locked her in the ground floor. A few days ago, her brother was hung up here, and today it was her turn. Che John was crazy. In anger, he grabbed a whip to strike her, but the bodyguard brought in 2 phones belonging to Officer Seo. He suddenly phoned Michael and told that he caught his daughter. He told Michael that his sister was tied in the ground floor. Che John warned him not to touch his sister. He asked to talk with his sister. And he gave the phone to Officer Seo and let her talk with his brother. You shouldn't go alone, you should call the police. He took back the phone and said he would give him 2 hours to get there, then angrily hung up on Officer Seo. At that moment, back at Chairman Chang's house, Chang and also returned home. She saw so many bodyguards and wondered why. The bodyguard hesitated, and she noticed her brother walking out with Che John, looking very suspicious. She went to her room, troubled by her thoughts, and was startled by the sounds of a fight outside. Michael came and fight with 2 bodyguards. Suddenly, Cheney ran in, calling for her brother to save her. He placed a grenade on her. She unbuttoned a coat to show. Michael stood up and pressed on Cheney's neck. Please bring my sister back so we could exchange. Feeling angry, Che John ordered to release the police officer. He saw Chang and thanked her. He picked up his sister and said that before he left, anyone who made a move would die. Chang knelt down and cried softly. The bodyguard opened his shirt, revealing that he had been tricked by her. Chang Ho felt angry and asked why she had done like that. Michael sat and watched his sister lying there, feeling heartbroken. Jean Bo-bei just stood beside him without saying anything. He wanted them to suffer, but he had promised his sister he wouldn't harm anyone again. But he couldn't refrain from taking their lives. He angrily left away. Jean crawled over and sat beside Kang Hai, saying, "Me too. We couldn't forgive them, Ms. Seo." Meanwhile, in Officer Seo's room, their bodyguards searched for the police report and discovered it. They quickly knocked him out. The next day both men happily talked about how they made Michael fail in the IT City project. Chang and stood outside and heard everything. She decided to secretly open the lock and take the important documents about IT City. Michael, I would do everything to prevent this one. Jean Bo-bei focused on writing an article to reveal the truth about the incidents 25 years ago. The next day Chairman Chang felt excited since today was their important day to decide who was the winner. Suddenly, Jang Ho brought in the newspaper to show to his father. Jean Bo-bei had written about his father's incident 25 years ago. He felt dizzy as he read and he knew that he would give in to her. Here, Chairman Han was angry while reading the newspaper when Che John came in to report. Outside, there were many reporters waiting to interview. He said that before the situation was exposed, they should hurry to IT City. Chairman Chang was surrounded by reporters asking about the events from 25 years ago as he drove out. Chang and felt painful and poured a handful of pills into her mouth and tears streamed. She recalled Michael's image that she loved him a lot. Jean crawled over and received the documents sent by Chang and She told that she should deliver it to Mitchell since it was the final gift. Meanwhile in IT City, Chairman Han advised Chairman Chang not to worry. As long as the situation remains hidden, the investors will stand by us. As he entered the press conference, Mr. Thibault approached the chairman and handed him the file. Chairman Call opened it and handed it other managers. And then he stood up to tell about IT City that his company would develop. Next, Chairman Han stood up to speak, but suddenly he heard their voices. They told the conspiracy that 2 chairmen had planned together. They believed that winning the IT City bid was all that mattered to get the money. The Republic of Korea holds no benefits for us. All investors felt angry and it was indeed despicable. Michael was also following all events unfold. The investors were furious to hear him say he would destroy everything Michael had built. The boss was now just waiting for the final verdict. After the conclusion, the investors declared that Michael would take over the IT City project. Everyone clapped their hands. Chairman Han asked Chairman Chang what was going on. He wasn't sure if someone had taken the contract yet. So they blamed each other and recounted each other's faults. The reporters crowded around, taking photos. Congratulate you on the achieved goals. Michael sat quietly, saying nothing. Were you worried about Chang? I feared she would live in regret for betraying her father. On the way back home, Mr. Chang wondered, why did they have my contract? Could it be that Chang took it and gave it to Michael? Chang Ho immediately called home. Meanwhile, the bodyguard found her unconscious and quickly ran to get help. Chang Ho called to inform them, and the two hurried to the hospital. Upon arrival, the bodyguard handed over a letter found in Chang Ni's room to them. In the letter she said sorry to his dad. Before leaving, she sincerely apologized to her father and expressed her love for him. Upon reading the letter, he was heartbroken. Meanwhile, Jin Bo Bei crawled over to congratulate Michael on his success at IT City. The two family-owned corporations went bankrupt because of this. Now, Michael's quest for revenge should come to an end. Suddenly, Dennis came in to report that Chang had taken sleeping pills to avoid facing him, and now she was in an unconscious state. Chairman Han reviewed the news, feeling weak in the knees. He grabbed a stick and smashed everything. The company has truly gone bankrupt. At that moment, the shareholders left, throwing his uniform down and trampling on it. Suddenly, Che John stepped in and chased them out. He looked at everything in ruins on the floor and then picked up his hat. "Dad, let me take you back to your room to rest." At that moment, he received a call urging him to go into hiding. "The police have discovered your fingerprints." Che John informed his father that the police were on their way to arrest him. He asked if it was about the framing of Seo Hyun. "If that's the case, you should quickly escape abroad." "No, I promised you I would deal with Kong Ta. I will definitely manage it, and then I will leave." When the police arrived with the warrant, Chairman Han sat there in his uniform. She said the case from 25 years ago had been exposed and that he was the one who framed her father. So what? The time for execution has passed. If so, then take a look at this. The case against the chief officer involves your boss Myo's son, Chang Ho, as an accomplice. This time, even if you hire many skilled lawyers, it won't help. Get ready to visit your son. Then she left. The police arrived at the hospital to issue an arrest warrant for Chang Ho. He lamented that it was all because of that traitor that his family was in ruins. On the way to the station, a spy from Che John secretly gave Chang Ho the key to unlock his handcuffs. When the car stopped at a red light, he quickly hit the driver and ran away. The police and the driver chased after him, but ultimately lost track of him. Meanwhile, Chairman Ko thanked the boss for his help with the IT City case. From that day on, he would not get involved in anything anymore. At that moment, Chairman Han called his son to say that the traitor was at IT City. He was talking to Chairman Ko, so you should make a plan. Che John opened the trunk, revealing a bomb inside. As Michael was walking, an assassin came to attack him. He wielded a sword, determined to kill Michael. With 15 years of experience, he took him down in a single blow. Just as the assassin collapsed, Chairman Han appeared and shot at him. With his agile body, Michael dodged Chairman Han's gunfire. When the gun ran out of bullets, Michael stepped out and told him to give up. "You should kneel and beg my father for forgiveness." He stepped forward, knelt down, and cried, begging for forgiveness for his actions. He took advantage of the moment when Kong was off guard, to secretly draw another gun from behind and shoot at him. Due to his keen and quick eye, he grabbed the gun. "I won't kill you, I'll let you live in suffering worse than death." As the two struggled for the gun, a shot rang out. He shot himself and collapsed. Che John was also present. Hearing the gunshot, he shouted loudly to find his father. When he saw his father lying there, Che John ran over and hugged him tightly. While Chang Ho was eating, he saw the newspaper reporting on the assassination attempt against him. Suddenly, the TV broadcasted the news that Chairman Han had gone to see the whole flower. He was worried and called his father, but the phone ran out of battery. On this side, Chairman Chang was watching the news when Chang Ho called. He advised his son that now there was only one way to follow Che Zon. So Chang Ho secretly found Che Zon. He asked Che Zon to escape through China, but Che Zon did not agree. "You had to be here to deal with it." The next day, Jin Bo Bei was walking when Che Zon appeared. Han sent someone to arrest her and then recorded a video and sent it to Michael. In the car, Jin Bo Bei asked why he became such a person. Che Zon screamed, "Because I wanted it." At the police station, the chief of charge reported the case and saw Chairman Chang's father and son entering. At this time, at the academician hospital, there were many policemen outside, so he advised him to flee. So he pretended to be a sweeper to escape. When he was at the hotel, he was discovered, so he had to escape again. He met Jin Bo Bei's mother and asked her for something to eat. She advised you to surrender. How long could he escape like that? Hearing her, he called Chang Ho and told him to quickly surrender. Che John was crazy. At first, my father told me to follow him, but now I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry, I'm too tired to sleep for a while. While I sleep, call the police. About the rumor, he told the police that Che Zon had arrested Bobbitt to try to deal with the crime at IT City. Hearing that, she called to ask for an order to ask for a helicopter to act. Meanwhile, Michael is riding a motorcycle to IT City. He drove into the two assassins who were standing. At this time, the police helicopter was also being dispatched. Police CO looked down from above and saw them fighting below. The helicopter landed, and the police quickly disembarked, while police cars surrounded the area. So Che Zon took Jean Bo-Bei away. Michael immediately ran on a motorcycle to chase after. While running, the police car stopped in the middle of the road, and he was forced to brake urgently. Officer Seo aimed his gun at him, but Che Zon rushed out of the car, pointing his gun at the two Michaels. At the same time, he took Jean Bo-Bei down as being kidnapped. You had to choose one of the women you love, and I would let her go. He shot Kang Hee, but she hit him in the hand, making him drop the gun. Michael rushed to hug his sister and called for Kang Hee, but Che Zon picked up the gun and tried to shoot, only to find it empty. As Michael picked up the gun, she pleaded with him not to shoot, but in anger, he moved closer to Che Zon, intending to take his shot. Kang Hee pleaded with him not to shoot, saying it would make him a criminal. In anger, he threw the gun into the sea and ran to hug his sister. Che Zon immediately ran away. And here, Kang Hee hoped that he will live happily in the future. Dear Michael, I cherished you very much, but now I had to go. Michael saw his sister passed away in his arms. He was very angry with Kang Hee. Suddenly, Che Zon rode his motorcycle back. Michael placed his sister down and drove off. Suddenly, he stopped the car and reached for the detonator. Jean Bo-Bei gasped in shock as she saw the car engulfed in flames. Che Zon went to the company to drink wine and watched the news about the explosion but didn't find anyone. Currently, the police were also looking for Che Zon. He listened to the news, laughed, and then ended his own life. Some time later, Chang En-I regained consciousness. She decided to go to study abroad. Meanwhile, Mr. Tae-bo went to the store to buy two lovers' clothes. One he brought back to Jean Bo-Bei as a gift. He also told me to wear this outfit today. She agreed to wear the shirt he gifted her, rode her bike to the park, and spotted someone who looked like Michael. Jean Bo-Bei immediately ran in to look for him, but he didn't find anyone. Michael secretly followed her. After that, he and Dennis went to the airport to return to the United States. Here Jean Bo-Bei was writing a diary. She thought that because she loved Michael so much, she had hallucinations. Suddenly, a boy came to give her a rose and a card. Jean Bo-Bei smiled and thanked the boy. She opened and saw inside that he was waiting for Michael. Bo-Bei was happy to learn that Michael was still alive. She looked at the sky where the plane was flying. She knew that he was up there. Okay, the movie came to an end.